Hey, brother. You all right?
Good morning, dear brother. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you.
Good, good. We are live already, by the way.
Okay,
We just
let me just
flew
stream
in the
this.
back door. I've
Just
actually
share
got
it
a
to my
pen
YouTube.
here. Actually got a pen for taking notes. I never really do take notes, but I thought, you never know. It's healthy.
Yeah, I usually do. Got like a big stack. This is like
I do-
half my notes here.
I do take note, though. I just
Well,
take note.
when
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you fly, brother.
I was going to say, when I used to first start having conversations on the round table or going on podcasts, I used to have all of my notes all laid out, all planned of like bits I wanted to say, like the structure. And I never stuck to them. And then just over time, I've started to trust my note taking up here. And then I do have them with me just in case I sort of want to, try and find some like facts, so to speak. So I can be like, well, in 1983, this kind of thing. But yeah, it's much more comfortable just having your notes in your head and just sort of like free flow rather than having to like, check notes. So I do have them,
Namaste, Dread Wolf. How are you doing? I hope you're good. Hope you're thriving. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're not drinking and driving, but definitely doing better than just merely surviving. So we got a cool little discussion today. The Mystic Sage, Chiron's Bridge to Transcendence. I was thinking about this. I actually made a couple of notes of things I don't want to forget to mention that are relevant. And names like Publisark. Sumerian word. Publisark. Hope I'm doing that right. Sounds almost like a publisher, doesn't it? So obviously, for those of you that don't know, and namaste to the others that are arriving on the different platforms. I see there's only 2 on YouTube at the moment. But yeah. I only just created this event recently, so that's the reason it take people a while to get here. This is something that's been sort of building for a while, and we keep getting to this point. I think Transcendence. What is the primary weapon? And this is sort of following on from our last discussion. And for those of you that don't know General Shinobi, his channel is recommended in my recommended channels list. You can scroll down. You can see a few of the channels that I recommend there. And go and check him out. He's got some cool content. He shoots from the hip. And he's an imaginative thinker. So he thinks out of the box, which is fresh and refreshing. It's not just book learning, it's mind expanding. Very Jupiterian, actually. Very Sagittarian, what we're sort of discussing here, the very idea, because... What's that, my darling? You want to come up? Okay, here we go. Sorry, give me 1 second. There you go. From the toe to the finger. That shoulder, go on that shoulder. There we go. It's easier. So that's a little Garthon. He's my dog. My dog. Well, one of my dogs, actually. I got a whole lot of dogs. So the whole idea of what Sagittarius represents is creativity, really. This is something that people don't always really appreciate. And I think it's quite fundamental. Oh my gosh, are you going to be difficult the whole podcast, eh? He's in a funny mood today. He's like Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger, he just can't get no satisfaction. He just can't get no. So he's all over me. He'll be climbing and coming and going as he sees fit, chewing on my clothes. The whole idea of the creative mind, the expansiveness of the imagination, I think is what we're talking about when we speak about Sagittarius. Obviously, the word sage and Sagittarius are fundamentally, etymologically, one and the same, connected. And we're talking about Zeus's extension into the world. We're going to look at some of the mythos related to this. And you can't speak about Sagittarius without speaking about Chiron, the centaur. And you can't speak about the centaur without speaking about the wounded healer. And so what are these stories alluding to? Obviously, from a shamanic perspective, we're talking about the spirit of the eagle, right? As well as the spirit of the horse. Even though the horse is shared by Saturn and Zeus, Kronos and Zeus, I mean, Kronos actually turns into a horse, right? So that he can get jiggy with the other chickie, so that his woman doesn't know he's getting jiggy. That's how Chiron's, that's his origin story.
Did you say the spirit of the eagle and the spirit of the horse related to
yes
Chiron?
Relating to, yes, essentially.
What about the
Zeus
snake?
and
Would the snake come into that at all?
I think that's quite interesting, because the bow of the centaur, right, he's aiming at the snake.
Right.
He's aiming at Antares in Scorpio, but on the path to Antares, he's also aiming at the center of the galaxy, right? Which is what is it called? Sagittarius A, right? The center of the galaxy. It's called Sagittarius A. Okay. That's the massive star, collapsed star, the black hole.
Does that imply there's a Sagittarius B?
Yes. Oh, okay. Sagittarius B is the gas cloud inside Sagittarius.
Right.
The gas cloud of stars and the whole lot going in there. And I think that represents, in a sense, the poison and the burning, right? Or the myth that relates to that is the poison of the, was it the Hydra's poison? I think it was the Hydra's poison that was the cause for the Chiron's demise. So where do you want to start, brother? We've got quite a lot of ground.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned with this, like the snake there, is because there's a link with Chiron and Ophiuchus, or Chiron and Asclepius, the wounded healer, and sort of with the snake and shedding skin and healing and rebirth and wisdom and the inner worlds. So that's why I was wondering if you'd thought about that correlation with the snake at all. But yeah, where to start? Well, I'll just start by saying what the date is today. It's the 24th of the 2nd, 2026, which is a number 9. And then if you count the Tuesday, it would be a number 11 day. So if you add both the 9 and 11, the 9th card is the Hermit, which represents introspection, solitude, soul searching, and wisdom, which is what we're going to be talking about today with Chiron and Sagittarius. Signifies the time to turn inward, away from the noise of daily life, to seek inner guidance and self-reflection. The Hermit suggests finding your own truth through introspection rather than external validation. So that's number 9. Number 11 is justice, which symbolizes balance, fairness, truth, and the law of cause and effect. So if you add the 9 and 11 together, you get 20, which is the judgment card, which is to do with accountability and waking up. And then that brings me to Anubis and the wane of the heart and the feather, and this kind of death or transmutation, or just to change, and that the only judgment happens is inwards. Like, we're the only ones that can judge ourselves, no other. And that this happens inside us, and that what we're going to be talking about today is, I'm going to bring up later, is the rivers. Of course, I'm going to bring up water today. I'll go and double check what it is, but today with the galactic calendar, it's I think it's a red Earth day to do with cosmic waters or something. So I will go and check that later. But this whole kind of transmutation, journey inwards, and then this judgment, like this death or to die. Chiron represented the wounded healer, and this kind of alchemical transmutation of turning this dense energy or trauma and dissolving it is a process we have to do while we're alive, and not wait until the end of our life. So I'll just bring that up because it's interesting. I've just sort of followed the trail of the numerology for today, and then the tarot. It's led me to judgment, and then Anubis, which is the abyss of Anu. Anu being, I guess, symbolizing kind of Zervan or cosmic time, the timelessness. So yeah. And there's some etymological weaves which I'll bring in later on in the conversation to do with Chiron and other gods and psychopomps.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the serpent relation, and I think it's quite important. When we consider the evolution of the zodiac, and it's important to consider and recognize that the zodiac represents an evolutional scale of development. Aries, where we get physical bodies and we take form, and that form produces the action of cause and reaction, and so the causal field becomes manifested. This thus represents the extension of the Taurus, right? And so the Taurus is where we start to become aware of how this action and reaction is operating. This takes us into a point of Gemini, the lovers, the twins, and we start to recognize our ability to communicate, right? Because communication becomes a bridge, and that bridge leads us towards our inner emotional world, so we can actually come to terms with our feelings, represented by Cancer, the crab, right? The hard outer shell. How do you break through that hard outer shell that we prevent ourselves from feeling our own depths and prevent others from seeing into ourselves, which prevents us from seeing into ourselves? That's Cancer. Then this Cancerian legacy, which is now becoming introverted, and the lunar power to gaze inwards and to sublimate our energies and our consciousness, thus moves us to the point of recognition of, okay, there's something inside of me, and this wants to be expressed. So the self-expression brings out the powers of Leo, the lion, self-expression. And the self-expression of Leo is the expression that moves through wisdom. And this wisdom wishes to become knowledge, and that knowledge starts to crystallize. And Virgo, the virgin, the pure knowledge that comes from within, is the response. And this is the Tahuti, the Hermes within us becoming revealed in a knowledge that we're now able to redigest. And that's like the proverbial seed of Yot. My dog seems to be expressing himself a great deal. Where is he? My dogs are all sleeping, but he usually does. He's very self-expressive. Or he usually sits on that couch. When he's laying down over there now, he's pretty chilled. So this knowledge of Virgo thus leads us to recognize the importance of balance and the balance of harmony within and outside with each other. And our relationships come into focus because we start recognizing that each person carries their own stream of inner knowledge. And the balancing of these forces produces the optimal environment through which to learn. And this recognition of these relationships of Libra thus takes us to the point of Scorpio. And in Scorpio, we become initiated into a sense of occult, mystical, spiritual potential. And all these mystical experiences, which are an extension of what has been brought into extension by the introverted, sublimating potential and power of the moon from Cancer, that has now come sort of a full octave gets into Scorpio, and Scorpio thus represents the serpent of transformation. Namaste, the star. How are you doing? Hope you're good. Land down under. From the land down under. And my Australian accent's not so good, mate. So this Scorpio, obviously the scorpion, the eagle as well, is another symbol of a scorpion. It's something shared with Zeus. And Scorpio, which is obviously Mars. So there's this overlap here of potential where Mars's feminine side is touching against Sagittarius, right? In the Ophiuchus bridge between the two. And so this Scorpio going into the secrets and delving into the mystical secrets brings about this eruption of wisdom. And the eruption of wisdom, this is what Sagittarius represents. This is the centaur. The centaur is the great teacher of wisdom, the great initiate of knowledge. And this wisdom of Sagittarius thus becomes crystallized in Capricorn, the sea goat, where this wisdom is now being applied on the physical plane to balance the physical and the spiritual spheres and achieve worldly success in order to fulfill the mandate of the family, which is Cancer, the opposite of Capricorn, in order for Capricorn to find balance. And so Capricorn energy is very much about creating an empire for one's loved ones and one's legacy, one's children. You know, Saturn, you see this story with Kronos and all his kids. And this takes us to a golden age within ourselves of enlightenment, where we are the water bearer, the bearer of true knowledge that flows through us like a river. And that awareness is the perfected state of Capricorn's spiritual alignment. So Aquarius represents this mastery of the spiritual, divine self. Capricorn represents mastery of the physical, material world. And these two extensions of Saturn bring us to the completion of the story, which is Sagittarius's mate, shall we say, Pisces, the other sign of Jupiter or Zeus, which represents, you know, the resurrection, the fish representing that eternal life, that new life, being born again, as they say in the Christian faith very often, and brings the completion of the cycle to be born again in the next octave of being, where once again we start the cycle of Aries. And so we can see this is an evolutional cycle, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And to focus on Sagittarius, you know, if we look at the life of Chiron, what is the story of the wounded healer and Chiron's association with the wounded healer? It's an interesting one, because a wounded healer is a shaman. Okay, let's begin at the point. What is a shaman?
Okay, Franklin, Indy wants to join us.
Yeah.
I was trying to wait for a good point, and then you start talking about shaman, so I thought I'd just chirp in there.
Yes, absolutely. Where is Indy?
He's on Telegram in a minute. I'm not sure if I can send him the link or whether it has to be you. He should be able to use the same link that he used last time, but send him the link. The old link should work. But okay, I'll let him know.
Because it's a single studio link. I didn't know if Indy would be awake because it's
late.
Yeah, it's like 2 or 3. I was thinking about speaking to Indy or Zerilat or somebody, and then I thought, no, shame, these guys will be asleep. So yeah, Indy should join us. So it's important to recognize what the wounded healer is and what a shaman is. You know, how does a shaman come to be a shaman? I was wounded as a child, right? I drowned. And because I drowned, I had a certain degree of brain damage, because, like, you know, when you're basically your brain starts to leave this world. It starts to leave the world of the living when you drown, when your heart stops beating. And so I was a wounded healer, and because I was wounded, I tore the fabric of space and time apart, and by tearing the fabric of space and time so I could travel through it, I had a connection to the other side. And that connection to the spirits is like a bridge. And that became the impetus, inspiration, and the driving force that forced me to become a shaman, whether I liked it or not. And so this is the old story of shaman. Shaman are the wounded healers of the world. And it's a deep wound that brings one to that recognition where one wants to sit in nature and just contemplate the natural world around oneself, get absorbed into the rhythms of nature and become a part of it and feel and see what it's telling us, because it's nature is Chiron. There's an interesting perspective to so we've got Indy Sages join us. Namaste, welcome, dear brother. I thought it was late on your end. I didn't know you'd be awake. Indy is, as most of you that come to the roundtable should know, he's been with us for a long time. He spends a lot of time working with shadow work, also anthropology, hermetics, various different occult sort of philosophies, the Tao. And he's a great thinker as well. Namaste, dear brother Indy. How are you doing?
Quite well. I'm doing fabulous. I'm on top of the world right now, and my cats are so glad to see me. They were here alone for a couple of days without me. This little guy was outside in the cold. We had a little snowstorm, I guess, but over here it didn't amount to much. Over across the valley, my parents got 4 inches, so I'm glad this little guy wasn't stuck out here in 4 inches of snow. He's happy to be in a warm house now, as am I. But as you guys know, when you're in a detention center, they keep it like 60 degrees in there. So people that aren't like chubby are going to be cold all the time. So I had to work out to stay warm for the last 48 hours. And I'm in like peak condition. I'm feeling like $1,000,000. I got that like runner's high going on and had a little cold exposure coming home, which boosted my mood and motivation. So I've started a new Facebook profile. I tried to make a new page, but they shut me down. But I got a new name. My new name is Rocco Bina Shamash.
Well, namaste, dear brother. And I'm really sorry to hear. I take it you are single at the moment then, yeah?
Oh, yes, very much so. I've been single for like the last week. Ever since she started to make threats of making false allegations and then like invading into my home and car and terrorizing my life. I decided it was time to break away. I made a report with the police and I covered my end of the deal. So basically everything that she's done is making her look really bad right now. And I'm sad to see that happen to her, but you know, she's digging herself a hole and that's just how it is right now. So I'm happy to be on top of the game and in a good place.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, brother. For those of you that don't know, Indy was on the live show last week and he was arrested by the cops during the live show. He was detained. I don't think they didn't make a charge.
When I got to the station, they were like, wait, you were really doing a podcast? What's it called? We want to watch it. Oh, that's what it's about. I want to learn all about this. Can we all join and like watch the show? I was like, yeah, come on, guys, check it out, man. We got so much to offer you guys. We have like hundreds of episodes. Whenever you're interested, just check it all out. So we got dozens of new subscribers and followers now, and they're very excited about this. Plus, Trump has been making announcements about disclosure in America, so they're really excited about hearing about what's going on with these extraterrestrials and what's going on with that. And I've told them that they're not really from outer space necessarily. They may have gone there and came back, but I believe that they're the angels and they're the gods and they were with us on the surface for a long time. And they're so astounded. They're like, oh my God, how do you know this stuff? This is so cool. They were just loving it. Everybody had so much fun with me. It was like a party in there. They had me in this cage where I didn't have my own room, but like, it was like an open cage, and I was like the intermediary. I felt like Timothy Leary when he was locked up, and he got to play the therapist and became friends with the warden. So I was like mediating everybody in there, and the guards loved me. It was so much fun. I got to chat with these girls when I was in the cage area before they put me in the general population for like just a little while before I left. And then I got to eat good when I was in there, but they were feeding me food that I couldn't eat. So eventually they got me food that I could eat. And I was like overjoyed. I was like, oh my God, my request went through, and they're giving me like pure 100% fruit juice and like rice and beans, because like I'm like a vegetarian, pescatarian. I don't eat this like soy meat and like breaded stuff or anything. I told them I'm gluten free and lactose free, so I was able to eat right and stay on my regiment. So I'm so glad to be here, and I don't want to take away from what you guys are going into here. This is amazing.
Well,
So
it sounds like you've had quite a major transformation, and you've come out with a new name as well.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's quite very relevant to what we're talking about today.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a new person, you know, so I got to give myself a new name, because that prior self was a different guy. He was kind of mopey, and he was kind of too serious all the time, and I'm like Mr. Smiles now, so I'm feeling great.
Well, peeps, that brings us back to the point. If we could keep our mics muted while somebody's talking, I just find that makes less disturbance in the background for the audio quality. I've noticed sometimes when I listen to the podcast, we can hear like buses and things in the background of other mics. It makes like an echo. So the wounded healer, I think this is probably a good place to start. You know, what is the wounded healer? The wounded healer is somebody that gets wounded, and because they get wounded, they have to learn to heal themselves. And I think this is something that applies to everybody on some level. Everybody in Earth is somehow a little bit fractured, a little bit wounded, a little bit hurt. I think nobody gets out of here alive. First point, important point. Second point, yeah, exactly. The star, you know. The soul retrieval is a big part of how the wound gets healed, and it's about a bridge. And that bridge between the spiritual and the physical becomes the space in which the shaman works, which is what Chiron represents, which is what Sagittarius represents, which is what that bow represents, you know, aiming that bow, it's aiming at the serpent. In other words, it's going to pierce the heart of the serpent that represents the potential of transformation, which represents eternal life, right? It's what we're looking at here. Essentially, we're talking about being eternal, the potential for eternal life, and that serpent is reincarnation. So the sage is moving towards the mystic union and to bridge that other spiritual zone with the physical zone, so that we can establish a mystic union. And that aiming at the serpent is relevant, and also the fact that in the process of aiming at the serpent, we're crossing the center of the galactic center. So there's something quite interesting as well. You know, there's an element of the galactic center, the Sagittarius 1 star, as well as the Antares, which represents serpents and has a close association with serpents and dragons, which in a big sense represents the Ouroboros of the galaxy, and that potential for continuity, the perennial life, if you will. So the wounded healer is this process. And how did the wounded healer come to be? If we talk about Chiron, Chiron was born deformed, because Chiron's father was Kronos, and Kronos wanted to get jiggy, right, with Artemis. But Kronos didn't want his wife to know that he's getting jiggy with Artemis. So Kronos turns himself into a horse. And as a horse, he comes to like Artemis and go, look, I'm hung like a horse. And Artemis goes, whoo, weak at the knees. And, you know, they get like up to hanky-panky, and next thing, out comes little Chiron. But Chiron has got like the bottom end of a horse. So obviously, Artemis is disgusted. She's like, ooh, I don't know about this one. So she gives him up. She doesn't want to have any part with him. She discards him like rubbish. And this is his wound that he bears. Chiron bears this wound of his own mother throwing him out, like she didn't want to have anything to do with him, and of course his deformity. And so that is the wound that drove Chiron towards knowledge, and it was thus that Zeus appointed Apollo to be his teacher, right? Apollo was teaching him. What was Apollo teaching him? I did write it down here. Prophecy music, and also healing. And Artemis, obviously, archery and hunting was what was taught to him here. And sorry, his mother wasn't Artemis. I got that wrong. His mother was a nymph. Philyra was his mother. Excuse the error I made earlier, mixing up these names. Artemis is the warrior. She teaches him. She's his teacher. And then there's the story of how he becomes better than his teachers. He becomes a great hunter. He becomes a great archer. He becomes a great philosopher. He becomes great at fortune telling, knowing the future, and he becomes an embodiment of the wise teacher. So that's like how we can become more than what we were because of being hurt. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? That a wound is like a gift.
Yeah, I think it is. I experienced that before, and I really feel like through having wounds, injuries, and mishaps, they're really a blessing in disguise, really. Because if you're able to heal from the wound, it shows that you can recover and you can repair yourself. And before that, you're in this fear. It's like, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to have a mishap or a mistake because everything could fall apart. And there's this fear that we carry until we've gone through it and we found that we can recover and we can heal back to full health, if not better health. And with that courage comes the faith that we can, even if we are injured or hurt, it will be just a matter of time before we get back on our game and we get back on the horse. And really, without being able to go through having that experience, it can be a difficult thing to imagine because you can't really even imagine it. You have to experience it yourself. It's hard to even believe that you could go through a hard, difficult event like you have. Like I went through a near-death experience, which for me was an entire rebirth of my spirit and soul. And before that, I was like sweating the small stuff, just blaming everybody else for my problems. After I was able to come back to life from near death, I was able to then no longer take life for granted and really be so much more grateful for the life I had been granted back. And at that point, I was able to start to work on myself, I started to realize that I was never going to get anywhere when I gave my power away through projection and blame. And I began to start to heal the parts of myself that I didn't want to see before that. So I was able to then see the parts of myself that needed repair on the spiritual and emotional body after they healed my body for me. Because what good is having this body in full health without being able to have the inner peace and the joy that makes it worthwhile? And I carried inner turmoil before that, and I was never able to cast it off. I didn't even know it was there because I was so distracted on denial of inner suffering through projection that, I wasn't going to go anywhere. And this was just right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology. I basically went from graduating in like the end of the spring semester, moved down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida in the summertime. And it was right then and there that I had a near-death experience and I was versed with the ability to know that Jungian shadow work would be able to bring me out of this. And by going into my shadow within, my inner child that had suffered and was suppressed, I was able to eventually trace my way back to my childhood trauma that has more echoes and mirrors that go on as it's unresolved and unmediated further down in life. So basically, I was starting to touch upon things that happened more recently with my emotional reactions that eventually led me back to actually taking lion's mane to be able to remember my lost childhood. I had state-dependent memories from being an alcoholic and constant weed smoker where I could only remember the times when I was intoxicated. And to be able to remember back to the times when I was a child, when I was in sobriety, was not possible for me. So, the centaur. And so it was a beautiful experience, and I had the tools that I needed, and it was just the right perfect time. But I also was going to tell you guys that Chiron is one of the centaurs, the icy bodies that comes from the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt. Now, the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt are these large bodies of ice masses that surround our solar system, which is hard to imagine because we just imagine the solar system is kind of open-ended. We see the sun and the planets and maybe some comets whirling around that go around with the trans-Neptunian objects, which are the dwarf planets like Pluto and Edna and Santa. And they've discovered like dozens of these little small dwarf planets beyond Neptune. And they are considered to be dwarf planets, but a lot of people think that they're actually probably more likely to be moons that had been shedded off of planets, may have been drawn by Nibiru's passing, which some people have equivocated with the breath of God. That actually was what destroyed the planet known as Phaeton by the ancient Greeks, or Lucifer by the Judaic people, or Tiamat by the Mesopotamians, that is now what they considered then the hammered bracelet, which we call the asteroid belt. And it's said that the moon, Luna, actually came from orbiting that planet that was crushed. And our moon has the exact same composition as the asteroids, with strange rare elements that we don't have here, like helium-3 and such, which a lot of people have gotten crazed about going to mine there, various nations. But the thing is that with the moon coming to us, also the upper waters of Tiamat came and crashed into Earth after it was crushed by the moons that were carried from the ice giants by Nibiru, according to their story. And I believe that they were able to tell this story, which is in the Enuma Elish and in Genesis in the Bible, which has been kind of broken down in mistranslation. They were able to tell the story because they were able to see beyond the here and now. And I've been able to do this in my out-of-body experiences, being able to see through time and space and being able to witness astronomical events that happen in the origins of our planet. And so through witnessing these mysterious origins, I was able to then confirm a lot of the theories that were considered fringe about the idea of that asteroid belt having been a planet. But it makes a lot of sense to me. And if you look at the rings of Saturn and Jupiter, they were likely to have been moons that were crushed. And so it's a similar situation going on there. But it's very curious because the centaurs, which Chiron is one of, and there's many of them, they are on a different plane of orbit than the rest of the planets from Mercury to Neptune. The Mercury to Neptune are on a flat plane, whereas when you go out to the trans-Neptunian objects and the comets, they're on an actually different plane that goes further out. And like 1 year of Pluto's orbit is like close to 300 years here on Earth. So we just recently approached the first annual orbit of Pluto since its discovery, and which is pretty exciting. It takes that long for it to be able to go around the sun one time, and since it was discovered, it's only done that once, which is pretty remarkable. But I love what you guys are talking about with the snake, and I have a slide that I would like to show. If we could pull that up for a moment as well. We could also go back to these centaurs in a minute, but I heard you mention that we're talking about the journey of the sage and like a potential battle with the snake of wisdom, and also the scorpion and the scorpion's heart being associated with Antares. Now, the dollar symbol is supposed to have been symbolic of the scourge or the slave whip. And the center pole of the dollar sign is considered to be the handle of the slave whip. And then the S is supposed to be the flail or the whip. And so it's representative of slavery. Now it's also represented by the serpent, as we see here, that's being pierced not only through its belly, but also through its head and tail as well. And so it looks like they've kind of ensnared it by giving it a bait that they lured it into their trap with. And so people have fear of snakes, and the snakes have been demonized in the false narrative of the fallen patriarchy as evil things. But in ancient wisdom, snakes were always represented as wise. Now, even so, the snakes being wise, they pose a danger to humans. And so if you carry fear, you're in much greater danger. But even if not, if you're just kind of stumbling around,
So what do you think?
attention, you could, get yourself into danger and come across a snake that could potentially
There
bite
we go.
them and poison you
There
to
we
death.
go. That's what we got.
But the Theriac in the ancient Greek teachings of the original Bible story talks about how they used the Pitos viper to create communion of the living body. So the humans become the communion when they're in adolescence and they're given a small dose of snake venom, and their body produces an antidote. Now, this is not an anti-venom. In order to create an anti-venom, we use the possum, who is a marsupial in America, and the possum is immune to snake venom. So the possum is able to, since it's immune, through time after being exposed to snake venom, can develop the actual anti-venom itself, which makes people completely healed. But what we're talking about here with the Theriac, which was being performed by Yeshua and his disciples, possibly having been given to them by Mary Magdalene, who was even more of an adept mystic, even though her story has been obfuscated. Son, you can't walk on the computer. I'm on the computer. And so the Theriac was an amazing thing in which they would have what's considered to be the antidote. And if anybody's been bit by a snake before, they know that being bit by a snake will put you into kind of a psychedelic trance. And so this is kind of a mystical experience, but you may develop like immense fear because you know that you're going to die. But when they had this ability to create an antidote, they knew that they would be okay because they had gone through it before. Like we mentioned before, when you're injured, it can be a blessing in disguise when you know you can recover. And they had the faith that they knew with the antidote they could recover and they would not be harmed. Basically, what the antidote does is they remain having some of the symptoms of the trance and the spiritual visions, but their body is then removed from the pain of the experience. So, and then they're able to make it through without being paralyzed. So it basically takes away the paralysis that would result from a snake bite and the pain, but still allows them to have the mystical experience. And it's said that in the actual interpretations of the old Greek classic translation of the Bible, it said that Jesus was actually bit by the Pitos viper on purpose so that he could receive the antidote from a young adolescent. And before he was able to get the bodily fluids of the young adolescent to be able to get the antidote from him, they arrested him. And as they were bringing him to the crucifix, he was not able to receive the antidote. And so it's said that he then died very fast in the ancient Greek tale. And that later on, it's told that in the false narrative that he was on the cross for a very long time. But it said that in the original Greek translation that he actually died. But I've done an interview with Freddie Silva, who just put out an amazing film called Megalith. And he talks about how the fairies are all around these megalithic structures, and that there's certain times when you can go and they will appear, and that they're only allowed to be within a certain range of those structures so that we can see them. And outside of that range, they're not able to be seen by us. So, but Freddie Silva was talking about how Mary Magdalene was able to provide Jesus with a different antidote when he was in trouble then, and she provided him with a pufferfish antidote, which paralyzed him for 3 days in a mock death experience. And then she reawoken him with the antidote for the pufferfish poison after the snake venom had cleared his path out of his bloodstream. Now, a similar process has been done with rabies recently in America in 2 different experiences, where someone was bitten and contracted rabies and started to experience the symptoms, which usually at that point it's too late in the game to be able to get the vaccine. What they were able to do was they were able to provide them with vitamin B after putting them into a coma with ketamine. And the vitamin B was able to fight off the rabies and take it out of the bloodstream without harming them, because when they were paralyzed, it didn't affect their nervous system. So a similar thing was happening to Jesus as what was happening to these rabies victims that were healed. And in the second experience of this, this healing, this miraculous healing of the rabies situation, it seemed like it wasn't working at first. And a grandmother, a Native American grandmother of the patient, was the only one that made it happen, because she came in and she interrogated the nurses, said, "Why isn't it working? It should be working. Do you believe this is going to work?" And one of the nurses said, "I don't really believe this is going to work." And she put like a medicine bag on her granddaughter's neck, and she told him, "You have to believe this is going to work, or you need to leave." And so she decided that she would believe that it's going to work. And soon after that, she started to recover miraculously. So a part of this is like having faith in the spiritual and the unseen to do its work for it to be able to even happen, which is kind of amazing, because you might think like maybe there are forces unseen that are at work here, and we have to facilitate them through our understanding, through us letting them do their work by holding that belief and holding that faith and understanding that it can be done, but we have to know that it can be done. And by doubt, and that's considered to be the work of the devil, doubt and discouragement, that can stop the whole process. So I'm done with my rant, and we can go back to what y'all were saying.
Yeah, I wanted to give Shinobi a chance. I just want to point out one thing. Take one second. Do you see this is the Ouroboros, and that the Ouroboros is Chiron's arrow, and Chiron's arrow is piercing the head and the tail and the center. That represents the head swallowing the tail and existing in the center, right? That's another way of representing a toric field as the Ouroboros. Dear brother, let's hear what you have to say. You've been sitting here so patiently and quietly. Fire away, brother. I know you've done your fair share of research. Let's hear it.
I'll just start with the symbol, the dollar, and then I've got 5 points to go across. I've started numbering my notes because otherwise it would just be all over the place. So hopefully that system works. With the dollar, especially the dollar bill, I sense that is the caduceus, but there's a disconnect between the masculine and feminine polarities, rather than it being like, okay, caduceus, co deus us, it's our communion with God or source, and this is what the dollar does. It creates a rip between us and source, and our energy is siphoned off to the banks. And the dollar shows this because it's just one S. It's just one part of the caduceus. It's not the flow. So that's what that symbol says to me. With the etymology of Sagittarius, I looked up what Sag means, and Sag is to sink or to go downwards under weight or pressure, or to decline to a lower level, usually temporarily. It's basically to a decline or to go downwards, but let's say it's to go inwards rather than downwards, down into the underworld or the subconscious. Sag. I is the central point, the individuation. Ta is our connection. Re us. So Sag, I, Ta, Re, us is basically just going inwards to the central I, the individuation, so we connect back with ourselves at our core level. That's what the word Sagittarius brings up for me. There's probably other avenues that we could go down with that, but that's interesting for sure. With Tiamat, being the asteroid belt, I think you mentioned Indy, I've always viewed Tiamat as the ionosphere, the plasma layer which goes around the Earth, because of course all things come from plasma, the place of the Ma, and Tiamat would be the mother of the gods. So for me that would make sense. And when I was looking earlier, it said that it's theorized that Tiamat was destroyed by a collision with the planet Nibiru or one of its moons, and its debris created the asteroid belt. Half of it was the asteroid belt and half of it formed Earth. Okay, well, what if when Marduk split Tiamat in half, separated the heart and the mind, that this is the heart of Tiamat, the Earth, so we're in the heart of Tiamat, and that there's a barrier which stops us accessing the mind of Tiamat, which is the all mind, which is out there. And then this is how we've kind of been contained in the heart, but without the connection to the all mind, the spirit beyond. And this is what the firmament is. It's both a separation and it's a division between the union of the heart and the mind, because Horus the Younger beheaded Isis as well. So you have Horus the Younger and Horus the Elder, and Horus the Younger beheaded Isis. So this is a kind of disconnection between the heart and the mind, which is just reflected in society now of people being disconnected from the heart and from the mind. Also, with the wound and the wounded healer, a wound creates a rip in space-time, and this is why it can be very powerful with connecting to our potential or to source or God or other realms and dimensions, because it creates a rift in space-time. But what people have done, because this trauma has been weaponized against us, and people tend to put barriers up rather than letting these emotions flow through them, and sort of using this very powerful energy and life force. They put up barriers, which is what it means to be damned. It's just put a dam and block the flow of this space-time sort of field, which this plasma, which flows through into this realm and through us. But people have put up barriers and via trauma. So trauma can always either do that. It can either block people, or when this rift in space-time is created, people can move into it, use this, and then therefore seek deeper truths which come through this kind of space-time rift. Also, Hecate comes to mind as well, and she is one second. So Hecate and Chiron are often linked. They're both archetypes representing the navigation of deep wombs, transitions, and the wounded healer journey. And Hecate is the guide through liminal spaces and crossroads, while Chiron represents the wisdom gained through the wound or through the suffering. But Hecate has been demonized because that's a way that they've kind of indoctrinated us to not go into liminal spaces. Because whenever I hear names of gods, Hecate, Chiron, this or that, I just look at the essence, and the essence of Hecate is the liminal spaces, the underworld, the kind of crossroads. And what's been coming to my mind the past week is read between the lines. That is the crossroads. That is the three ways. You have to part this false illusion we've been given to see what the middle way is. And the middle way is the essence, and that's to read between the lines. And those lines are neural pathways, rivers. You have to kind of go to the in-between realms to see what the truth is. And I think that when this rift in space-time has been pushed upon us, that we're kind of forced in a way to read between the lines, to go into the in-between spaces, and then with working through the shadow, Plato's cave comes to mind. And I know there's the whole story of Plato's cave, the shadow on the wall exiting and going upwards, but I quite like the analogy of to be able to walk through the walls, that the walls just dissolve the barriers. So you have a wall that people are staring at, which is blocked by a trauma, and therefore the shadows are able to reflect against the wall. But rather than going upwards through the light, just dissolve the walls and walk straight through the wall, because that's what walls are. Walls are there for just temporarily for us to perceive something, like these walls around us, which separate the field, I guess, which is useful, but it can be dissolved so we can sort of tap into the rest of the all there is, which is the 99. So yeah, I'll just or also briefly before I finish my little rant, I need to talk about the snake and the dragon, and then it representing wisdom, water, intuition, flow, death, and rebirth, because snakes represent death, and that's not death as the end, it's to shed your skin, to dissolve the barriers so that you can become who you are at your core. And the word die, which I've mentioned before in Chinese, means butterfly. So all death is to transition, to change, like coming out of your chrysalis or cocoon to become a butterfly, to shed your skin, to dissolve the barriers which have been put up via trauma and stuff. And that's alchemy. And the snake and the dragon are powerful symbols of alchemy, and that's why they've been demonized. And Chiron is a half human, half horse, and then Capricorn as well would be half goat, half. Well, actually, no, not Capricorn. Let's use Baphomet. I'll use Baphomet, the goat head, half human, half animal. These symbols have always been demonized because it represents the bridge between realms, the animal and then the human. And then that's why these have been kind of demonized, and Chiron was seen to be a monster. So I'll leave my rant there for now.
I think it's lovely that you relate Chiron to being seen as a monster, because his own mother saw him as a monster. And it was one of the reasons, I think, why Zeus took special care to make sure that he was so highly educated by Artemis and by Apollo, as sort of like a compensation for the fact that his mother, who was a nymph of the deep ocean, the Philyra, had basically discarded him. There's a metaphor here with the myth of, and I want us to draw a distinction and to show the connection with Sophia and her proverbial afterbirth, Yaldabaoth. Well, he wasn't Yaldabaoth named by her, he was named by himself, right? Because he thought he didn't have a mother. He was so detached from the divine feminine that he thought that he was the sole creation and the sole creator behind his own extension. This is a great time for you guys to smash the like button and share this across all your different platforms. It's the only way to show any support for the channel and appreciation if you're enjoying the conversation. And so there are these two aspects of Chiron that I think also need to be looked at in order to understand the sage, the Sagittarius, which obviously represents wisdom. And he was considered the wisest of all the teachers because he had surpassed Apollo and he had surpassed Artemis in his skills with hunting, his skills with the bow, his skills with dancing, his skills with prophecy, music, healing, learning. He was a genius. And so he became the teacher of many. I mean, we know the story that he was Asclepius's master, but he was the master of many of the young heroes, you know. The story of Heracles, for example, right? So Heracles, this is the story of how he became the constellation. He was immortal because he was a son of Kronos, right? Naturally, he was a son of a Titan. That meant he didn't pass away. And a party was hosted. Heracles was there. All the other different horse humans were there, because there was a whole race of horse humans now. And they got drunk and they started fighting with Chiron. They started getting aggressive towards Chiron, started fighting with him in drunkenness. And Heracles was chasing them off. And in the process of chasing them off, Heracles was shooting arrows that had been dipped in the blood of a hydra, I believe. And it was like the most toxic poison that there was. Is it the hydra's blood? I think it's a hydra's blood. Yes, hydra's blood. And this would cause a fire and a flame to burn from within, an excruciating way to pass away from the world. And he accidentally hit Chiron with one of these arrows. And in the process, Chiron was in absolute agony. Now, the thing is that Chiron, being immortal, couldn't pass away from this, because Chiron had deity powers. And so he just suffered in pain and agony until he reached the point and he realized, well, there is no point to this, just suffering in agony of eternity. He decided to forego his eternal, or his longevity is really what we're talking about. What we're talking about as being immortality, we're talking about of the flesh. And in the process, he decided to give that immortality of the flesh as a gift to Heracles. And that selfless gesture moved Zeus to become humbled and inspired by this noble gesture, that he elevated Chiron to being immortal in a way beyond the flesh. And so here we have the start of the story. Why do we celebrate Christmas in Sagittarius time? Why was these great story of leaving the Christmas starts at the end of Sagittarius, where Sagittarius goes into Capricornius. Got to understand. So there would have been 21 to 22 to 23 to 24, right? The 3 days. And then the rebirth on the evening of the 24th. And on the 25th has been reborn. So this is this process of transition beyond matter into the bridging the spirit and the physical realms. And we till this day celebrate this sacred time after the winter solstice. So that is an important sort of point in the cosmic cycle that relates to this immortality of Chiron. So Chiron thus represents this this ability to self-sacrifice and to become a martyr and a great teacher. He was a great teacher of Heracles amongst many others, and he was the wisest of all the teachers. And here we have an image of, I think that's a young Heracles being taught archery by Chiron, for example. And so there's Chiron, the wise teacher. There's Chiron, the warrior. And here's an interesting point. When you look at the Sumerian version of the story, we've got Publisag. And Publisag was married to Ninisina. Well, that was his consort. His parents were, I believe, Ninurta and Ningirsu. Oh no, those were other names of Publisag. Sorry, Ninurta and Nungirsu. Those are related to the Publisag, and he was an agricultural deity and a deity of war, and very importantly, a guardian of the abyss. That's an interesting point, right? Now, this makes us think about that image that Indy Sage shared as a guardian of the abyss, right? That's like, I think it's quite relevant because this brings us back to this story here. You can see this is his arrow piercing the Ouroboros, reaching through the heart to connect the tail and the head. That represents the abyss, right? That represents the centrifuge and the potential to move in and out of the abyss, in and out of the eye of the storm of the toric field, in the space where nothing exists, but connecting it to both the alpha, the head, and the omega. So the word El, which is an old deity name, relates to this serpent with the arrow through it, you see, because El becomes connected, the beginning and the ending. And so we see many names related. Allah, these names are connecting the alpha and the omega through the heart, because the A is the first half of the 22 characters, and the L is the second half, and L represents Lamed, represents Libra, represents Venus in its masculine phase, represents scales of justice of Mart, represents the enactment of divine law and order, and also happens to be the furthest out on the proverbial wheel of the Ouroboros, or the zodiac. Think of the zodiac as the Ouroboros, if you will. And so is a fulcrum and acts as a lever for the turning of this around the Sagittarius A point in the center of the galaxy. So, there's a lot of interesting allegories to look at here with regards to this story and the Sumerian idea of the sage, the Sagittarius, the horseman, being a warrior deity and a deity of agriculture is quite interesting, and guarding the gateway to the Abzu, or the underworld. That in itself is quite interesting too, as a god. And you can see that connection between Scorpio and Capricorn is quite interesting, right? As that proverbial bridge between the inner underworld of Scorpio, that transformative, that represents the card death of the major arcana, and Capricorn, that represents the card devil of the major arcana. So we can see there's a rather interesting sort of a correlation here between the devil of the major arcana. Let me bring it up.
They don't want us. They don't want us climbing high. That's why the goat's always being scapegoated, because they want us stuck on ground level. They don't want us climbing. That's why it's always the scapegoat. Always the goat. And yeah, we've got the year of the goat next year as well. So it's a fire goat too. So next year there's going to be some scapegoating going on. Something to do with fire, 100%. Probably this alien invasion next year. Probably that. And they'll probably say it's Enki coming back, the devil, the demon, or it'll probably be beings from in the earth, because I think that's what Anunnaki means, is people from the earth, not from outside. And they'll probably say we're under attack, when really they've probably just come here to help us out, like try and get rid of this parasite.
Yeah, I've always heard it referred to as the ram, but I love the spin on it, putting it as the goat. Very cool. Dig it. Because, I mean, what's the difference really between a ram and a goat or a sheep? They're all in the same ballpark, right?
No, a sheep and a goat are very different. I would say that.
Wouldn't the ram be the bridge between the two, though?
Yeah, I mean, the ram is more of the. It's a. I don't know. I think the ram's more of the child.
The ram's more of the child. I guess they have different representations, but basically what I'm saying is that the Chinese symbol is actually the ram. So the goat is not really accurate to the Chinese, but I mean, it's very similar. So, but I think the ram is as similar to the sheep as it is similar to the goat, is what I'm trying to say. Although they have different representations.
Yeah. Well, it's like with Baphomet, some people have been sharing images of Baphomet, which is a goat head, and they're calling him Moloch, who's a bull. So this is how they sort of like muddy the waters, because people are sharing an image of this goat head, which is Baphomet, and they're saying that it's Moloch, who is a bull head, and they're very different. So I think that the bull, the goat, and the ram have kind of been mixed up, and people have been sharing stuff online and kind of, done on purpose, so people like don't really understand what they're looking at.
I think there is something to what Indy's saying, because a ram is a male sheep. And in the Sumerian story, they speak about that. I think they mention sheep and goats being brought here. So the sheep and the goat represent something together. Like they are like essentially from the same stock. Like if you look at a male sheep, which is a ram, right? And you look at a like a male goat, some of the big male goats, they look very similar. The difference is their fur. They've got similar kind of things going on. They got similar temperaments too. Like a goat's a bloody aggressive little bugger. Are you guys good? Yeah, you're still here. Good.
Yeah, and so also, do you guys ever heard of the Golden Fleece? The legendary Golden Fleece that was protective, magical fleece. And that was actually flying, apparently. Golden wooled ram fleece. Chrysomalos in Greek. Now, I can't remember who it was gifted to. It's Jason and the Argonauts seeking his treasure, guarded in a sacred grove. I'm not that familiar with the Argonauts, though. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
That is an adventure. I haven't really deep dived into it, but the story is, that they were out on this quest to find the legendary. What was it? Was it a weapon or something? I forget. But yeah, I mean, that is quite interesting too, because I think that sort of, to me, that sort of represents the war deity, discovering their action and moving out towards fulfilling action. I just wanted to tie off what I was saying earlier. So as Chiron in the Sumerian story, as representing the bridge between the underworld, you can see the card of death here, right? Which is that transformative potential that moves one into the underworld, and that deep diving into the underworld, which is Mars, which is the ram, interestingly, in its feminine element. And then we see this sort of representation. So here we see the idea of the ram and which is quite interesting. They represent two elements. This obviously represents that sort of part of the self which gets attached, which gets addicted, that part of the self that is this that we trap ourselves, delusion, getting lost in the self delusion is on some element what this represents. And then this one represents the dissolving of the illusion, the dissolving of all of these delusions, the transformation of life's delusion that becomes transcendent into the underworld. So there's an interesting sort of little correlation between those two. And I think, like, when we look at Chiron, the wounded healer, I don't know. I don't like the way it's represented. So much focus on the healer. Yes, Chiron was the healer, but you don't hear about the wisdom very much, do we? When they speak about Chiron.
To be honest with you, you don't really hear much about wisdom anyway. Anyway, that's why I'm grateful for these round tables and other podcasts and stuff, because wisdom's not really spoken about too often these days. Did you just I just want to like rewind a second. Did you say Mars is associated with the underworld? Oh, is he gone?
Oh, we lost it for a moment.
Well, I've always thought that Pluto was the underworld.
Yeah, Pluto was considered to be the underworld. Hades and Pluto were just the Greek and Roman names of the psychopomp of the underworld. And I think Mars is also associated with that. There's always a dual aspect of it. And Mars is associated with that because Mars is the planet of war. And so through war, there's death. And through the death, there is the traveling of the souls from Mars to Pluto or Hades. And so it's like the whole journey that begins in one place and ends in the other, but it goes across probably every planet in between. Also, we have that same kind of situation with the crossing of the soul through the Milky Way. And as it starts in Sirius and crosses through Orion's belt, it ends up in Deneb and then crosses into Cygnus, which is represented by the swan. And so that's a whole process of rebirth, but it begins on one end and it ends on the other end. And the Milky Way was referred to as the sky serpent by the Native Americans. So that kind of ties in as well.
So is Mars linked to the underworld just because it's the planet of war? Because if
death as well.
What's that?
It's a planet of death. But it's not the planet where the rebirth happens, which would be in the underworld.
Okay, so but it's a planet of death, but not necessarily. Okay, because I don't know. I've never heard Mars being associated with the underworld, so this is all new. I thought it was Pluto, and then if it's going to be just because of war and that's where people die, it's like, well, with water, so you can look at the water planets, and surely they would be more associated with the underworld than Mars, because it's water which carries us through the underworld. And I've taken us off topic slightly here, Franklin. You were talking about the wisdom of Chiron before I had to bring that up.
Apparently, the association with the underworld for Mars comes from the association in Mesopotamia with Nergal. Not many people are familiar with Nergal, but if people look into the narrative of Marduk, they will definitely come across Nergal. Now, Nergal was like the right-hand man of Marduk. And so if Marduk represented the great destroyer Nibiru, Nergal was the war planet of Mars. And it was known as the god of war, but also the deity of death, pestilence, and destruction. So he also famously married the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, who became the ruler of that realm. And so the association with Nergal goes as far as to his bride too, Ereshkigal, which I believe was one of the several creatrix goddesses that was responsible for creating human race as a hybrid slave species. Ereshkigal was up there with some of the elder creatrix goddesses, like Inanna or Ishtar and the Sword, and Ninhursag as well.
Yeah, man. The mythology is really interesting, and I'll explain to you, like from an energetic, vibrational perspective, right? If we look at the enneagram, 9 is the completion of the cycles. This is the traditional Chaldean enneagram, right? The way it comes from Chaldea. So 9 is the number of Mars, right? And it represents completion because it represents action, because Mars completes the action of cause and effect, and the effect is an action. And 9 is also the end of the proverbial cycle, but the cycle is an octave. So the octave actually ends on 10, right? That's why there are 10 Sephirot and not 9 in the Kabbalah. So 9 has to cross the event horizon in order to be reborn as 10, right? This is why Jesus, the Emmanuel, represents eternal life, right? And represents the transcendence of the physical life in order to be able to live for eternity, right? The immortality of the soul. And this idea of the immortality of the soul is symbolically bound by 2 points. Firstly, Pisces, which is the end of the cycle, and Aries. How is it bound by Aries? Well, let's take a look at this for a moment. When is Easter, right? When is the conception, right? So if you look at it like this, Aries, Taurus, Cancer, Aries, Gemini, Taurus, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, Capricorn. That's the 9th month. So this represents the gestation of the human embryo, right? Coming into being for birth. And Aries is also the lamb. The ram, as we know, is a male ram. And so the sheep, right? The lamb is the baby Aries, if we want to consider it. Emmanuel, Jesus, being a male embodiment of the the ram in its youthful form, that is going to become the ram. And so this ram has this association of the beginning of new life, and also represents the humility required in order to be able to cross the bridge of Pisces, right? The fish, and go in under the water for the new life, that life which is perennial. So there is this association mythologically with the lamb, which is Aries, and that's Mars. And so we can see this represented here on the enneagram with Mars ruling number 9. Now, at the center of the enneagram, notice all the planets here. We've got the sun, we've got the moon, we've got Jupiter, we've got Uranus in number 5. We've also got the North Node on number 5. That's, you can look that up. That's Western and Vedic astrology. We got Mercury on number 5. We got number 6, Venus. These are all just standard issue numbers related to planets, right? Both in sidereal and conventional heliocentric astrology. Number 7 is the mystic, obviously Neptune. Also the South Node. The South Node and the North Node in Vedic astrology is considered to be 2 invisible planets. And we consider it to be relation to the offset of the spin of the Earth related to the moon's presence. And then we've got Saturn, which is number 8, which is the achiever, and 9, which is Mars. So these are standard issue numerology. This comes from Chaldea, really, and previously. So notice that you don't see Pluto on the list here. What happened to Pluto? Well, if you look at Pluto, whether you look at it in terms of heliocentric or whether you look at it as sidereal astrological lore, Pluto is the planet that has no number. So what does that mean? That means it doesn't fit on the outside of the circle, because the outside of the circle are the numerations. So where does he fit if he doesn't have a circle? Well, Pluto sits at the center of the circle. So we say that the plow is towing the circle. So the rest at the center of the circle becomes the emanational force that causes the circle to turn. This is hence why the circle is alive and why we have this concept of octave, or dective, or enative, however you want to look at it, that motion of turning, which is producing the 10 from 9, in the same way that an octave of 8 is 7 tones landing back on the note of C. So this 9 then is the pure Aries, that ram that needs to dive in to the center. And when he dives into the center, he's crossing the event horizon, and that event horizon has no numeration, and that event horizon is Pluto. So you can see the association between Mars and Pluto. And interesting, another point, you might notice a very close association between Uranus and the sun, right? The sun's color is yellow. Uranus' color is a kind of a yellow, an offset yellow. You might notice that Mars's color is red, and that Uranus's color is an offset kind of red, right? A slightly deeper, slightly russety kind of a red color. So they're on the similar vibrational tone, Mars. And this is why you might find that modern astrology creates the obfuscation of saying that Scorpio is ruled by Pluto instead of Mars, but it's actually ruled by Mars. But Mars and Pluto share this very fundamental relationship. Hence, Mars is the one that sends people to the underworld, right? If you need people sent to the underworld, you pick up the phone, you call Mars, like, Mars, there's an army on my gates. They need to go to the underworld. Mars is like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Mars rocks up, story's done, everybody's in the underworld, squared away. Pluto is like, wow, thanks for the new recruits, buddy. So you can see how Mars and Pluto work together to keep the underworld populated. But yeah, this idea of the event horizon being crossed by the number 9 is an interesting one, because it has to do with truth, and there is nothing truer than war. You know, when the warrior faces another warrior on the battlefield, there's no time for lies. Right? It's literally one of them is going to the underworld. Yeah, man.
Yeah, well,
that's his tail. Oh, go ahead, Shinobi.
I just want to say quickly, water has war in it, and it's the war Tor. It's the energy of war, I guess. And the Tor would also be a door. So therefore, the war becomes a warden, like a war Tor, the war door, the door to the war. So I know Mars is seen as not having water, but you know, it is kind of there with the name. Perhaps it's the door to the waters.
Mars is associated with water in popular culture, but I mean, scientifically, Mars never had water yet because it's not in the Goldilocks zone. But there was a fictional myth that happened from a bad telescope in the late 1800s. What happened was, this one guy, or maybe it was the early 1900s, but this one guy thought he found life on Mars. He had a really blurry telescope, and he came out and told the news, and it was on all the headlines across the world. There's life on Mars. There's rivers, there's giant roads, they have vehicles and boats and airplanes, and there's little green men navigating in the crafts on Mars, and maybe we'll be able to go and meet the Martians. This became a whole craze in popular culture, and it still remains today. And so since that craze has been kind of enthralling to the public, NASA's just kind of gone with it to gather funding. But they're not going to expect to really find anything there because it's in a frozen place outside of the Goldilocks zone right now. As the sun is growing into a red giant, it will then meet to Mars, becoming the extended Goldilocks zone. As Earth comes out of the Goldilocks zone and becomes too hot, Mars would be the next planet that would be habitable. But that goes against the mythical story of the Martians that was so exciting to people. Now, in truth, we've actually found that scientifically, not only was Venus in the Goldilocks zone 750 million years ago when it had liquid oceans and lake bodies of water. But also Carl Sagan was the first to notice that there are blobs in the sky of Venus that seem to be very anomalous. They don't move like any type of cloud formation. And when they went to investigate this with spectral analysis, they found that the actual chemicals in the upper atmosphere seem to be transforming that could only be happening from prokaryotic life forms in the clouds. And so they know now that there's likely to be bacteria in the clouds of Venus. But with this comes implications that perhaps life in our solar system may have originated on Venus. And after it became uninhabitable, as it has slowed down over time, and now its day is longer than its year. So it gets scorched on one side at a time and gets extremely hot, and it's hot enough to melt lead at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's thought that potentially, as it was brought to us by the law of one material, where Ra, the social memory complex of Venus, claimed to have come from Venus in very ancient times, and that the soul of Venus still lives as a social memory complex. And it's potentially what was going on is that if there are other beings that have come from beyond Earth, it would be a likely course to have come from Venus first and then extend from there to subterranean Mars and Tiamat, after which point Tiamat was destroyed. And it was said in mythology also that Mars was destroyed by a nuclear attack, having blown off its atmosphere from the massive explosion. And so they may have gone from Tiamat to Mars to Earth from Venus originally. So it all kind of lines up with science, except for the idea of Mars having been exploded and losing its atmosphere is not really scientifically savvy or probable, although, we don't really know how, if they had such advanced technology in a breakaway civilization, that they could have had explosions beyond our understanding that could have a reciprocal effect that might actually do what they said it had done and remove the liquid water and atmosphere from its explosiveness. So, but typically when there's any type of explosion on a planet, it will create what's considered to be outgassing, which is a form of terraforming in which you would gain more gas and more atmosphere from any type of explosion. Typically, like volcanic activity is one of the telltale signs of outgassing. So when the planet gets heated up, it starts to emit gas from under the surface through volcanic eruptions, which creates atmosphere. And over time, the atmosphere gets purified from blue-green algae in the water bodies, turning the silicates in the atmosphere, changing it from a methane form atmosphere into an oxygen-rich atmosphere. At which point it's thought that on Earth's development, that the bacteria became engulfed into the eukaryotic cell, which previously had a different type of metabolism and energy source when it was a methane-based atmosphere. And then as that changed, we lost that in the cell and it became replaced by mitochondria. But a lot of scientists have considered that they can't even imagine that there would be any sign of there being a different energy source in the cell because there's no vestiges of it. But that doesn't mean it's not the case. So that happened very long ago, and there could be a long lost organelle of the cell that no longer functioned and was just extricated from the cell as a vestigial organelle. But interestingly, the whole moving around of things is fascinating. And I feel like if life on Earth was seeded by the Venusians or the Martians or those from Tiamat, then they would be completely compatible with our genetics. And so they could come here and make us a hybrid race and do all sorts of things, because not only would they be humanoid, just like us, they would also have very similar genetic development and composition. So a lot of people haven't considered that, but the idea of them coming from another star system would mean that life would have been seeded like from another source maybe, and then that source was seeded to different celestial bodies and solar systems and galaxies simultaneously as it made its way to Earth. And at the same time, they have the same source and they develop similarly. So that's another potential understanding of how the development of life could have propagated across the cosmos to develop into similar forms of humanoid advanced beings with strong dexterity of their hands, allowing them to have high technology, and potentially having a similar timeline to develop into the humanoid form through different stages of evolution, which are evident through the fetus and the fetal development. As we see, it develops from a fish to amphibian to reptile into mammal. And in human fetus development, we develop a coat of fur in premature states. And then that coat of fur is shed off before we're born, which shows that we likely had aquatic mammal ancestry as aquatic hominids that made us lose our coat of fur and develop various features of an aquatic mammal, which is absolutely fascinating because we have every feature. It's not like we only had a couple different features. Like when a baby's born prematurely, even if it still has its coat of fur, it will be born with vernix, which is only found on the harbor seal. And the harbor seal puts the vernix in the womb onto the baby when they're premature, so that if they are born prematurely, they will still be able to float, even though they have not developed enough fat to be able to float in water, which is blubber or subcutaneous fat or adipose tissue, which is very different than terrestrial fat, which is considered to be extra muscular tissue. So interestingly, humans are the only terrestrial mammal that seems to have blubber. And it's very helpful when we're in the sea or in a lake for us to be able to float and stay warm in cold water. But as far as being helpful on the land, maybe to push some weight around a little bit, but it's very troublesome somewhat on land for as far as like damaging the knees and ankles, which are a weak point for us as we have just come into bipedal stance within fairly recent times in our evolutionary development within the last few million years. So we're still working on our knees and ankles, trying to become capable of supporting us, and they're very much of a weak point at this point for us. But there's also the food weapon system has been used against the collective to weaken our joints, and lectin-rich diets, which Dr. Stephen Gundry always talks about if you ever come across him. The lectins are basically all of the staples of basically every culture on the world that are very damaging to us, to our gut health and our joints. So without having a lectin-rich diet, we could have very strong joints, and become like Samson and just rip out of the chains and have no weaknesses. So it's a matter of great question as to whether we actually truly do have weak joints, or we have just been poisoned for so long, maybe through our own ignorance of not knowing the right means of sustenance and various plants in which to eat, because we apparently came from another place. When we arrived here 200,000 or 300,000 years ago, we were at loss as how to find a habitat or a niche in the natural environment, and had been able to finally try to invade the niches of the caves, which we had to fight with various predatory animals to be able to achieve. We had to fight with the bears, which the bears of ancient times, the cave bears, were much bigger than the bears that we have today. And also the saber-toothed tigers and things of the sort. So we've been in kind of a battle to find our own niche here, because we don't really fit in here. We've come from another place, whether that was we came from the sea, or our ancestors came from the sea and created us as like a new hybrid species, or maybe we came from living underground. It's another possibility. Which the story of Yima from the Zoroastrian tale of the ark that was built by Ahura Mazda for us to live through the extended winter of the Younger Dryas Ice Age, or perhaps another ice age. In that story, it said that we were given the raven to be able to figure out whether the land was habitable outside of beneath the surface. So it lines up with the tale of humanity only having become pale in the Caucasian race within the last 7,000 to 8,000 years. And so it was actually pretty surprising that people were not pale skinned before that time, according to genetic analysis. But it does line up with the fact that there are stories where people had lived under the surface and were able to live through cataclysms like the Lachamps event 40,000 years ago, where there was strong radiation coming through the weakened magnetosphere, and having lived through the Ice Age, having been chosen to be able to go down there in preparation before it hit, being told by the god Ahura Mazda, and the Cherokee and other Native American tribal stories of having lived in the underworld with a guiding spirit, whether that be the Great Mother or the Ant people or the various races that were able to protect us through those cataclysms to bring us down into their sanctuary beneath the surface. So there's also an interesting tie-in with the habituation of being under the surface for the advanced breakaway civilization, having lost their island worlds, where both Mu and Atlantis were seen to have been on an island, Mu being in the Pacific, also tied in with Kumari Kandam and Sundaland and Lemuria, which were in the Southeast Asian islands up to Japan, through over to the western side of Indonesia and Malaysia, and then through the Indian Ocean, respectively. So there's a lot of talk about these lands that used to be exposed during the Ice Age at a lower sea level that have now become covered with water and may have ruins on them that have kind of been lost through time. But humanity has legends of these societies, and the thinking is that they did live on isolated islands where they had a breakaway civilization that developed much faster than the mainland, and then were able to take control of us. And some of them were able to offer us great civilization. It said that though the Atlantean may have been the one that actually built all of the pyramids around the world and brought civilization to mankind, as we had been kind of exiled from Babylon as the 72 tribes. We were at a loss of being able to take care of ourselves, having been left out in the wilderness without being given proper teaching and training of how to take care of ourselves and live off of the land, until Enki showed us, under his various representations or similar archetypes, how to do hunting, how to capture fish with a net, and how to prepare a meat and different foods, how to create clothing and shoes. The story of China, ancient China, and the Green Emperor is very fascinating when it comes to this aspect, where they say that Nuwa, his wife, and Fuxi, the Green Emperor, came to rescue the people. They were considered to both be serpent people from the West, and so they were portrayed as having serpent tails, whatever that was supposed to represent, and they carried the tools of the architect with them. They came and taught people that they should stop running around barefoot with no clothes and trying to eat animals by eating their fur as well. And they said, you do not need to eat the fur, and you can use that hide to create shoes and clothing for yourself and blankets. But then you want to eat the animal beyond that part of the animal. That will be the more sustenance part. And so the people before that were kind of at a loss as to what they were even doing in their story. They were just doing all the wrong things. They were running around with hurt feet that were cut and broken, trying to chase these animals down, and then not knowing how to cook them, trying to eat them wrong, until they were corrected by Fuxi and Nuwa, which showed them actually how to build a net and how to snare an animal, and how to create weapons to shoot at them with or club them with. And they gave people civilization and brought them into a wonderful place. They also prepared them to battle against the serpent people who were going to come to attack them and try to overrule them, which they were said to have been able to prevent that from happening by helping them become in consolidation and unity as a legion to be able to protect themselves. So it was a beautiful tale. Nowadays, they say that the Green Emperor was a mythical tale, that it never happened. There never was a Green Emperor. But those stories are actually very prominent And it's hard to believe that they were not something that has happened, just lost in the actual record of history, passed on through oral tradition. But there's a very similar thing, and I also wanted to tie this in with what he was mentioning about Tiamat representing the ionosphere and the upper and lower waters of the asteroid belt and the waters that crash to Earth. Tiamat was traditionally said to have become the mountains. When she was slayed, her, like all of the giant tales around the world, the giants were said to have been slayed and then became the mountains. Their bones and rib cages became the mountain ranges. And in the story of Nuwa and Futsi, their creation story tells of the same thing. They were said to have killed off the giants and created the mountain ranges from their bones, just like it was said that Marduk did that with Tiamat and all of the other giant tales from all other civilizations as well. This is a lost and forgotten race of the giants that have mixed connotations. They were originally said to have been wise and taught us about the stars. And then later they were said to have become fallen and become cannibalistic and then chased us and terrorized us and you know, in worse ways than as mentioned, but we won't go too deep into that. So, but that's prevalent in the stories of the Paiute and the Lovelock Cave giants that were red-haired.
You know, you mentioned something quite interesting that I was going to respond to, which is about the white skin.
Yeah.
And that is quite interesting as well. You know, when we look at, I believe it's the birth of Noah. It mentions in the Bible that his skin was white and it shone. And there was this wonder at this white baby. And it's referenced in Noah. We see the same reference made by Torquil Jacobson, who is the preeminent scholar of Sumerian languages and translation, about Ziusudra. Ziusudra was also a baby with white skin, and it was different to the skin of all the other humans, right? And Ziusudra's dad was Enki. So according to the Sumerian stories, hence Enki wanted Ziusudra to survive. So Enki engineered it so that he could indirectly give him the plans on a lapis lazuli thing so that he could build the ark and take in the seeds of all the animals. Yeah, obviously, I think it mentioned seeds of all the animals and all of his bloodline and his family, and survive the flood that Enlil was determined would wipe humanity off the earth. So we see that that's the same myth, and we see the reference to the skin color being white, and that is a point. And just to take it another step further, at a later stage, when Marduk rebels, I think he's being called Baal, hence the word rebels, right? Baal, rebel. When Marduk, and in the form of Baal, rebels against the other gods and overthrows them in a great and terrible war, one of the things that he desired was to have offspring, because the Igigi that were under Marduk's care, he was the commander of the Igigi, and they were the laborers. They were the bigger, gigantic beings, the Nephilim, really what we're talking about here. There were exactly 200 of them, in the same as the Greek myth of the Grigori, where there were exactly 200 of them. Just like in the Bible, there were exactly 200 fallen angels. No coincidence, a specific, very specific number in all of these myths. And that in all of these myths, they took human woman to procreate. Once again, very specific information, which is universal to all of these myths, whether you go to the Akkadian rewrites of the Sumerian, or the Sumerian, or the later writings of the Shemite people, or wherever you look at it, you should find the same story. And this is quite interesting. And to bring that back to the white skin not being natural, I think there is an Akkadian term. What is the Akkadian term? So what have we got here? What have I got here? I had something I wanted to share. So here we okay. So this is Torkid Jacobson, where he looks at the work, the treasures of darkness, the Lulu. That's the primitive man that were created by these beings. They were created for the purpose to take over the hard labor, especially the hard labor of the Ijiji. Now, this is Torquil's translation. I want you guys to know that. Yes, it's exactly the same as the guy who's apparently never, ever studied these languages. It just so happens that, you'll find the exact same translations. If you go and do your research, you must go and take a look at the psyop of dispelling everything that Zachariah Stitchkin said, because actually it was said a long time before Zachariah Stitchkin, decades before, by the preeminent translator of Sumerian languages. You got to take this to heart. So here it speaks of Ea and Ninursag and Beletili, or it's another name, and how they created humans out of a mixture of clay and the blood of a sacrificed god to give it life and intellect. And the context is to solve the problem of the lesser gods rebelling against their workload. Now, the lesser gods are the Ijiji, right? That were rebelling against them. And so the Lulu is the Lulu Amelu, the savage man that was created. And these savage human beings had to be taught, right? And now we get all these teaching, Tahuti, Toth, it's often called Toth, the Tahuti, or the Quetzalcoatl, or the Hermes, or all these great teachers. Now, here's an interesting point. When the Adamatu is the name of the Akkadian word for the primitive man, right? That's the Akkadian word. And the Akkadian, so now we're not looking at Sumerian, we're looking at Akkadian, which was basically echoing or retelling the story of Sumerian law. And we see where the word Adam comes from, right? Adamatu. But Adamatu is actually a red kind of soil, right? It's a kind of a red, specifically a red earth soil, a russet red soil. So with this, many people have considered that the first original human beings were of a reddish color, like the Native American Indians, like the reddish color of many of the Vedic people. And we have these very ancient cultures of the Indian people. But it's very clear, it's not a black color soil, it's a red color soil. So you're going to find all the psyop nonsense out there about the black Africans being the first. No, I think that there were black color skin amongst the Ijiji. I need to go and find the references of some, because there was, in the Ijiji, there were different races, and they were big races, and they weren't all the same size. Some of the Ijiji were white, some of the Ijiji were black. Some of the Ijiji were bigger. Some of the Ijiji were 15, 16 cubits tall. Some of the Ijiji were more than 20 cubits tall. A cubit is more than a foot. These were incredibly large beings, giants. This is Nephilim we're talking about. And they wanted to mix their seed with the genetics of women so that they could also have offspring on the world. And this is where the race of giants came from. So that's just something I wanted to share here, because you're going to find all this nonsense propaganda that says like everybody was black. No, everybody was red color, a reddish brownish color, not black. The black and the white came later. The original color is a kind of a brownish color, like the Islamic people. It's a reddish brownish color. Us white skin and black skin people, we came after. And that's like an important distinction, which you can actually find quite a lot of references to support in Tolkien's work and other noteworthy scholars of Sumerian and Akkadian language and literature. And by the way, when you hear that psyop about Stichian, don't believe everything you hear. Remember, there are ancient stories that are repeated. And if you go and look at the so-called authorities on Sumerian language, you will find that they echo pretty much what Stichian says. The only difference is Stichian is actually Stichian with the Sumerian, he applies other myths from other further ranging to try and bring them together. For example, the Vedas, right? You find the same story in the Vedas. The differences in the Vedas, they came in flying machines, and they give you specific dynamics of how the flying machines looked. They explain that the flying machines that the Devas arrived in before they came and changed man were Mercury spinning motors, and they give descriptions for how these motors would create a gravitational field and how these Vimanas would fly through the sky between the worlds, and that these beings from the heavens, these deities, these gods, the same ones the Sumerians are talking about, actually came from other worlds to the earth, which is what the Sumerian story says. So you can see this parallel. And while we're sort of brushing onto the story here, it might be worth looking at Indra, right? So Indra, who is Indra? Now this gets interesting. Somebody was asking about the bridge. Who was that was asking about the bridge? I believe it was Namaste, my cherry, Zephyr. Namaste, everybody that's been arriving. I think it was.
We were talking about
Police.
the bridge from Mars to Pluto and the bridge across the Milky Way.
No, that's the bridge I'm talking about. The
Okay.
bridge that they're asking about is this one on the screen here, which is to hear more about Chiron's bridge to transcendence, and also recently pondering silicon being the impact of artificial harmonic resonance on Earth and the fleshy inhabitants, and that's quite an interesting point, because we're looking at Indra's web. So when we talk about Indra, now Indra is Zeus. I want us to understand Zeus is Indra, right? Zeus is the sky lord, the king of the gods. He rules over the weather. He rules over lightning, over the clouds. He has a lightning bolt, right? He represents the enforcement of law and order and the highest intelligence of the deities' potential. Indra is all of those things to a T exactly. And just like Zeus, he has a lightning bolt, right? And just like Zeus, Zeus has got the all-knowing potential on the ability to transcend and to see all relevance. This is the second principle of Hermes. This is the correspondences. To understand the correspondences between all things is to see how all things are connected. And this web of correspondences that is ruled by Zeus, being the highest level of mental potential of thinking and enlightenment of the mind, is reflected in Indra, because Indra has a web, and Indra's web is that proverbial web of correspondences that connects all things to other things. And when one understands how that web of correspondences works, one has the ability to do magic. So this relation to Indra and this relation to Zeus, and Zeus being the father of this Chiron, I think is quite relevant. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, but you guys please fire away.
Well, I thought Kronos was the father of Chiron, not Zeus.
Kronos is the father of Chiron, but Zeus is the one that took him under his wing and made sure that he got educated by Artemis and by whatchamacallit. He got taught
Hello.
in the highest halls. Yes. In other words, basically the father just basically, well, I can't be your father because your mother will be pissed. My other wife will be pissed off. And the mother was like, oh, I don't want this thing. Kick it away. The father was like, whoops, I can't admit that's mine. My wife is she's gonna freak out. And Zeus came and became the surrogate father. And in the end, when Chiron passes from the world, it is Zeus that is moved to compassion and love, and it is Zeus that elevates him to have a place in the stars. So Zeus is very much a part of this the story, and Zeus is Jupiter, and Zeus is what rules Sagittarius from an astrological perspective. So that they are so fundamentally connected. And just to point out the bridge between transcendence, that bridge is sacrifice, self-sacrifice, right? And sacrifice is recognizing the sacred. And the sage sacrifices themselves for the greater good because they understand that wisdom is to do what's best for the world, not what's best for me. So that I will surrender myself and give my physical immortality to Asclepius. That is what provides the bridge. And Sagittarius also rules benediction. Sagittarius also is joviality and abundance. And Sagittarius is about giving. And so if you are giving money to the poor, or if you are sacrificing to give to people that need, you are then tuning into Jupiter's energy, and you are bringing that abundance that you have to the world, and that you get blessed with more abundance. And so this is the wheel in the tarot card, the Wheel of Fortune, and why the Wheel of Fortune represents Jupiter, Zeus, because the wheel is that extension of resources moving through each, like the digestive system of one thing gives to the digestive system of another thing, ends up with the microbes in the soils digesting the excrement in order to give the plant food, the minerals to the plant, so that the plants can grow the fruits to feed the person that made the excrement. And it's this cycle of life that is represented by the Wheel of Fortune. And that wheel on a spiritual level is related to this bridge of transcendence, which is why you look at the Wheel of Fortune tarot card and you see on the one side there's an angel climbing up, on the other side there's a demonic being cast down, and that wheel gives us the potential and the impetus, and it relates to Sagittarius, the sage of wisdom, being that element of giving. So giving, and hence, like at the end of the sphere of Sagittarius moving into Capricorn, the Saturnalia moving into Saturn from Sage is about giving gifts, is about giving to the poor, is about giving. And so that is the bridge between transcendence. And I think that is how this story is sort of coming to fruit. Yeah, brother.
Yeah, there's a connection with Indra and Zeus. Of course, you mentioned that Jupiter is connected to Zeus. From the Greek to the Roman, but interestingly, there's a connection with the Mesopotamians from Ishkur being the original Sumerian lightning hurler, and then later in the Babylonian, Assyrian, and Akkadian myths, it was known as Adad or Adad, and so there's a strong connection there. But the story of Kronos is that he was the youngest son of Uranus and Gaia, and he ended up marrying his sister Rhea. He was a Titan, but his children, I believe Zeus was said to be one of his children, but he devoured his other children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. And it was Zeus who was actually hidden in a cave by his mother Rhea. And he was able to liberate his siblings by having Kronos disgorge them from his guts and bring them back out, so they were able to live. So I wanted to mention that, and they said that they tricked Kronos into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes instead of Zeus. So he was tricked into thinking he had swallowed Zeus, but he had only just really swallowed a stone, which actually kind of ties in with some of the giant legends of the Celtic people, which is pretty fascinating. And then later, when Zeus rescued his siblings, he ended up tricking Kronos into drinking a potion that forced him to expel them from his gut. And so that's how he got them out of there. But Zeus then led the Olympians in a 10-year brutal war, the Titanomachy, against Kronos and the Titans, and ended up wiping them out. So it's fascinating how that played out there. Now, the Titans are represented by the ice giants, and Zeus and or Jupiter and Saturn were kind of like the pivotal ones in the middle, between where Kronos was like the last Titan that extended beyond the ice giants into the gas giants, and that's where the transformation was made. But interestingly, Saturn seems to be more reactive than Jupiter, and they seem to have been brown dwarf stars. Saturn still emits microwave radiation from its poles, and so it still has some aspect of starness to it. Whereas Jupiter seemed to have been a lesser star, and so it's seen that Saturn was more connected to the Titans. But it's been found that Jupiter also has rings like Saturn, which was discovered by Ingo Swann, the famous remote viewer, who was able to psychically understand that Jupiter has rings before scientists were able to find them. It's an interesting little tidbit.
You know, Enlil was the Sky Father, right?
Yes.
And
Anu
also,
wasn't he? It was
sorry?
Anu was the Sky Father, wasn't he?
Well, Enlil represented the mountains and the sky. It wasn't just the sky.
I thought it was air and the wind.
Air and wind? Probably.
I think Anu represents the divine spirit, right? Like the highest, because the wielder of lightning on Earth was Enlil. He was the one who wields the lightning, and he was the storm god, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was the storm
and
god.
Enki was the Abzu, the waters in the underworld and the world.
So Enlil would be the wind or the air or the mind or the electric, and Enki would be the water, the earth, the plasma. So, and then I just view Anu as Zervan, Enki as Ahura Mazda, and Enlil as Ahriman, Ahriman. And the reason for this is because if you look at the mind, the electric, that's what's ruling now. And Ahriman forced his way out of the womb. This electric sort of system that's been built around us has kind of been forced upon us. They're using the air, they're using the mind, they're using the wind. Not to say that it is Enlil, but it's what he represents. And perhaps the image of Marduk chasing Tiamat with the electric rods is why I think that they're using this energy of Marduk or Enlil to kind of divide us. They're using this electric wind mind to divide our minds and separate us. And then Anu would, from what I've read, would be the heavens or the sky, not necessarily the mind. But if he was to birth these two brothers, Enlil and Enki, the mind and the heart, the electric plasma, the air and the electric sort of mental, which is Enlil, and then the waters of the earth, which is Enki, you have the cosmic time, which is Zervan, who gave birth to two twins, Ahura Mazda which would represent the heart or the good, and then Aruman, which is this Aruman, which is this kind of arrogance which comes from the mind. So yeah, I mean, as I always do, I'm just blending things together, and it may be wrong, but to me it just makes sense that Anu would represent the kind of beyond the heart, beyond the mind, beyond the earth, and then beyond the heavens.
Yeah, that's spot on about Anu representing only the air in the sky. But yes, Enlil did represent the air in the sky in the storms, which were considered raging storms, like lightning bolt storms. But also Enlil was associated with the mountains, is in his association with the Ekher temple in Nippur, which was considered to be the mountain house. But Enlil's representation was definitely of the earth and the sky, because they had to divide the kingdom. The kingdom was not in the clouds above in the sky above the sky, as they referred to it as, because they originally said that the gods descended from the sky beyond the sky, from which Anu came. Even though it was kind of absurd, because Anu was the grandson of Tiamat and Abzu, who came from the waters. So I don't know how originally they came from the waters and then he ended up in the sky. It's a bit strange, but if you consider the fact that Tiamat was associated with another planet in those waters, then it starts to make sense, because Tiamat came from a different water planet, and then Anu was the one who came from the sky, whereas they were from the waters of that other planet. And so he ruled the sky and the sky above the sky, where they thought that the gods lived on top of the clouds. And so that was the association of Anu. He lived on top of the clouds. But then Enlil and Enki were dividing up the kingdom on the surface. And so Enki was kind of given the water where nobody really lives, but they would have vessels there. And then Enlil was given more power to rule over all the land. And so he was definitely the god of the land for sure, and the sky. But the sky or air is definitely associated with the mind. If we look at the Western zodiac, air is associated with the mind, untethered from being grounded on the earth. And so it has the freedom of imagination to go with the wind and fly about and go into different places, where earth elements are very stable and locked down in stability because they have that groundedness to them. And so he kind of represented both of the aspects, which have somewhat of a contradiction in our understanding, but they're integrated through the storm. And through in the ancient times, the storm was represented as something that brought fertility to the crops. And so they wanted the rains to come. The storm was something that they valued for fertility of the crops. And later on, with Baal and Molech worship, they did a lot of tantric rites to be able to receive what they considered to be the semen of Baal or the semen of Molech from tantric rites, which would mean to them that the rains would come down for the crops to grow. And so that was a fertility aspect that's associated with sexual fertility as well, because of the liquids involved in the sacred union, and the sacred union of the sky and the land as well is an association.
I need to switch to my phone in a minute. Is it all right if I share a couple of tabs on the laptop?
Yeah, just
I've got about
before you change this.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to say one thing that it will only take 1 second. In the older Sumerian texts, the Ishkur that you were talking about, who's also a storm card, just happens to be the son of Enlil. Just heads up. I know there are more modern versions that say that he has different parentage, but according to Torkil Jacobson, who is the preeminent scholar, and there have been none that has spent their entire life focused on this language in the way that he was. His research of these original Sumerian, in the Akkadian myths that came 1,000 or 2,000 years later, they changed the story. I just thought interesting to see the association between Enlil and him as being the storm gods. Please, brother, throw your images at us. Throw them hard.
Shinobi, I think you might be muted.
Ah, yes, thank you. For some reason, it won't let me share my screen. So I'm having to share tab by tab. So I'll try and just do it really quickly. It's a bit annoying. But I just wanted
Can
to
I
show
tell you what to do?
Yeah.
If you just go to the tab you want to go to next, on the top it will say share this tab instead. Can you see it?
Yes.
You
So
just click that.
I'll do that as I go through.
Yeah, and it will just keep renewing.
Awesome.
Cool, brother.
All right. So Esme needs to use the laptop in like about 5 minutes. So I'll switch to my phone. But I just wanted to share these real quick, that the glyph for Chiron is a key. And as I go through, and the reason for that is because of, I think Chiron was found in 1977, we're told, and it's to do with the person's name, but forget about all that. The symbol is a key, and this is a key to our psyche. And I'm going to sort of go through the etymology and explain that this whole Chiron story is about unlocking dormant potential doorways, and that is the dissolving barriers, the transmutation, letting the rivers of our core, our ancestors, flow through us rather than being blocked. And to do that, we need to open doorways. So that is Chiron's glyph. So this is Chiron, or Charon, the ferryman in Greek mythology who transports the deceased across the river Styx, and Acheron of the underworld, sort of seen as a bit of a grim reaper archetype, so associated with, I guess, Saturn, I guess, there. And so this next symbol I'm going to share is the Chi-Rho symbol, which is the chi and the rho. It's the sort of it's seen in the middle of Celtic crosses. There's one just down the road at the church. It's got the Chi-Rho symbol in the middle. The Chi-Rho is the chi, the rho, it's the movement. I just see it as it's the union of the cart and the bar, so that we have that target, the bow and the arrow. So we have the target, and we do that by using the chi, the chi, and then the rho, which is the movement, which is the connection of the chi, the life force of the car, and then the rho of the heart, that movement. And then this chi rho is the movement which moves us along the rivers of the underworld, or the inner worlds. And then Kairos. So Kairos here, very mercurial figure. Kairos is known as the opportune moment, or flow time. That would be associated with the North Pole of Saturn, in my opinion, because that is the hex, the magnetic north, which is associated with water. And you see there he has scales in his hands as well, which represents, I guess, balance. And there would be a link here with Anubis also, because Anubis is Anu, and then the abyss. The abyss is the waters within. So then that leads me on to Chiron again. So we've gone through the Chiron glyph, which is the key to doorways, the Charon, which is very similar to Chiron, which is a ferryman which carries the deceased across the rivers of the underworld, and then the Chi-Rho, which is the movement, the chi and the rho. And then that brings me on to Chiron, which is to do with transmuting and going inwards across the waters and navigating these waters of the underworld to connect to our core. And so Ophiuchus and Chiron are entwined, because Ophiuchus would be related to a I can never say the name, Asclepius. But Ophiuchus is sometimes seen as the 13th zodiac, the snake in the center of the wheel. Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer bearing the serpent just means to bear wisdom, intuition, death, rebirth. That's all that is. And Ophi is wisdom, and Eucus in Russian is the first person singular present tense, which means I study. So Ophi Eucus means I study wisdom. And it's interesting that it's seen as the 13th sign of the zodiac sometimes, because that is 13, which is Mem, which is related to water. And there's also a link here with, I just forgot to share this last tab. Okay, so this is the North Pole of Saturn, so-called Satan. And this is interesting because at the North Pole you have a hex, and I've explained before in these round tables that the hex is a symbol for magic, and it's a symbol for plasma and water. And when we connect to this North Pole of Saturn, which I view as just Kairos flow time rather than linear observed Chronos time, when we move into this flow time state, we can bring this magic into this realm. So we bring it from the unseen into matter. 1 second, Ori. 1 sec. So yeah, sorry, I just got a bit distracted by my son there. So yeah, I just wanted to tie those all together because that's sort of what I do. I just weave the liminal spaces and try and see the broader picture, the broader tapestry, just by weaving the in between. So I do certainly believe there's a link between Chiron, Kairos, and the Cairo. And they all seem to be related to movement, going inwards, connecting to the subconscious, death, transmutation, alchemy. And if you link them all together, Saturn relating to the Grim Reaper or death, it's just change. Yeah, the Grim Reaper is Chiron, who carries you across the rivers, and this is what Saturn does. And Saturn has many moons. Add up all the number of 276, you get 13, which is the 13 moons, 13 months. And the 13 comes up again and again and again. You have the 12, which is the cube, and the 13, which would be the center, which is the centaur, which is our center, the information center, the central eye within. And it's about going inwards, this wisdom of Chiron, so therefore we can expand outwards. Because what's been happening is people have been outsourcing their power, not going inwards. And that's how we're in the state of the world at the moment. When people start going inwards, dissolving these barriers, therefore we'll be able to expand. And you do this via liminal spaces, the spaces in between, the rivers of our psyche, of our mind, the waterways. And so yeah, I just wanted to link those together, see what people think. Yeah, I'm gonna switch to my phone now, but I'll be locked in still. Yep.
Yeah, brother, beautiful weave. Totally beautiful weave. One quick thing I was just going to say, we were talking about elemental energies, and I thought to bring this up here about elemental energies. I was having this conversation with my girlfriend last night, and she went to a Steiner school. So obviously in a Steiner school, they learned about this kind of stuff. So hey, if you want your kids to learn about this kind of stuff, send them to a Steiner school. It's like a good grounding. And I just found it interesting that one of the things, there you go, my sweetheart. One of the things that we were talking about that I found interesting was this, the idea of what choleric is fire, right? Phlegmatic is water. Sanguine is the element of air, and melancholy is the element of earth. Right? But melancholy rules deep thinking, right? So melancholy is related to deep thinking, being philosophical, really going in deeply. What we're doing here is very melancholic. So the idea of the earth element being related to very deep things, where the air element, which is sanguine, it's a surface level mental energy, right? It doesn't delve deeply into it. It's a jack of all trades. It looks at this, looks at this, looks at this. It looks at all the different things to try and find all the different correspondences between all the different topics. But the earth element, that's the real deep mental energy. And so like we look at Vedic knowledge and we see the 4 faces of Brahma. And this is often in many older traditions related to the Muladhara chakra, which is the earth root chakra. And he has the 4 faces. And Brahma represents the higher mind and the ability to analyze, right? There's a reason we say anal eyes. Have you got your anal eyes open? Are you analyzing the topic well? So the ability to analyze something, that's an earth element's power. It's an interesting thought. We don't realize this. So we don't realize that the earth is very methodical in the way that it approaches information. And it looks at information in a very deep analysis is when you really go deeply into something, right? You're not just thinking about it on the surface. You're analyzing each and every little aspect of it, breaking it down and trying to find, it's like taking a motor apart, each piece, and then putting it back together to understand how it works. So I just thought that might be an interesting point to point out about the air element as it relates to the sanguine and the melancholic temperament, which is that deep earth temperament, and the phlegmatic, which is a very reflective, also a mental temperament. That's much more to do with the sort of the way in which we see ourselves, the way in which we sort of relate to things is more the phlegmatic. But it's just food for thought. These elemental, and this is a very ancient. These ideas are very ancient. You know, these you'll find the books of Agrippa outlines this quite well. It's the big book on the end, the occult philosophy. It's a big thick one. The 3 books of Agrippa. It dives into these 4 different concepts and how they relate to the elemental energies and how they relate to the constitution of humanity and our different dispositions psychologically and physically.
Does it go before medieval times?
Oh yeah. I mean, these ideas, as far as I know, go back to long. I mean, I think it goes back. These ideas are the basis of medicine, right? So the medicine from like 1,000 years ago, right? That medicine was based upon this, yeah. And I mean, this is the roots of medicine. Understanding the connection between the psyche and the physical body, and the mind and the body, and finding, ways to treat. So this is like ancient medicine that we're looking at.
So you associate the red with the clay soil? Because it doesn't say any of the elements here. I'm trying to make note of this, but I don't see the connections with the
That's
elements.
the Akkadian work for Adamatu.
Choleric?
It's an Akkadian word, Adamatu. And that's the name that in the Sumerian it's called Delulu, right?
What are we talking about?
Akkadian, sorry?
What are you associating Adamatu with? Choleric?
Well, I wasn't associating it with choleric, but like the red color is fire. So red clay soil would sort of insinuate a fiery element, wouldn't it? And we're speaking about wild humans before the humans were refined. And I suppose fire element is a very wild element, isn't it? It's very wild. It just burns. It's like you really got to focus it down, because if you leave it on its own, it's just going to take over and it's going to burn the place down. So,
and fire would also be light as well, and so it'd be like red. like to when you've read something, you know, it can ignite that fire, because in a book, that's where the light is buried in stories, in books. So when you've read, or you're well read, you can ignite that fire or the flame. So the color red and fire, and when something is red, or like when you've like, I guess, read yourself, when you're reading, you know, what's inside the internal systems, when you're well read, that's when the flame can shine, I guess, or you know, expand.
So is a phlegmatic associated with black?
It's associated with the element of water, and
Oh.
water cleanses, right? So water will cleanse, and so water will bring the dirt out of the body, if that makes sense. So if you put water over your body, the water will turn black or dark because it's taking the dirt off of your skin, if that makes sense. Because that's what water does, is it absorbs everything into itself.
And then
And
melancholy.
then reflects whatever color it holds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the melancholy is green or orange. I'm colorblind.
Oh, yeah, they're just associating melancholy with green, yeah, because green has often been associated with the earth element because of Saturn's association with the green man. And so the green man has often been associated with the earth element. The phlegmatic in this diagram is blue, associating with water reflecting the sky and holding the sky in its gaze, and you know, the sanguine reflecting the yellow of the sun, the sky. In the sky you see the yellow color. These are the classic sort of alchemical colors of Western occultism for the elements.
So
Yeah. In medieval
go
times,
and
they associated these things with different biles, what they called them, and the red being blood, the yellow associated with bile, the phlegmatic or black, I think, associated with lymph, like you mentioned, the clearing of toxins, so the clearing of dirt. And then I think the melancholy was associated with obviously sadness, but I can't remember what bodily fluid they would associate that with. Maybe spit. I'm not sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
They reckon that this age of the system is about, I think 2,500 years. Is it?
Oh wow.
Of these ideas,
Ancient
2000, 2005, and so we're talking about 370, 460 BC. So it originates in ancient Greece, the physician Hippocrates, right? Which is where our Hippocratic oath comes from, right? Which is got to do with medicine. And he was, you know, considered as the father of medicine, who linked personality traits, right, to bodily fluids and humors. And this is what we're talking about now. And from this, Greek physician Galen later formalized these into 4 temperamental types. And this thus evolved through the eons. But that's really sort of where the ideas stem from.
So I just I kind of explained what red kind of signaled for me. I just want to go through the other colors. The green, like melancholy, I think you mentioned, would be like the in between, which for me signals like branches which turn into leaves, like the in between, the liminal spaces. Green's associated with illusions as well, I guess. Like you have green screens, and then also the liminal spaces come to mind as well, because limes are green, the liminal, the liminal. And yellow would be the yellow, which is associated with air. And then, like you said, the sky, the sun. And the blue is below, which is water, which is the underworld. So just looking at the colors, like before what's mentioned, what they are, just kind of like weaving like with what blue is like below, and then how that relates to the subconscious and the underworld, which is water, and then yellow, which has yell in it, which is to like air, like breath, which is the sky, and you know, the sort of outwards, and then the green, which is the in between, and then yeah. So I thought I'd just share that with what the colors brought up for me.
Cool. For me, I connect Saturn, the green man, also with Uranus or Uranus, his father, being cyan, blue. So it's got a tie in with Neptune in the blueness, but a tie in with Saturn in the greenness, and like a tinge of yellow, like Franklin mentioned earlier too. So there's like a lot there with Uranus. It's carrying a lot of different connections.
Wow, we've been going 2 hours and 35 minutes. Time has just evaporated. I'm getting so fluffed up. Like YouTube must just fluff off now, right? Like I can barely comment in a live. YouTube rejected my last comment. Do you know what my last comment was? Like, how you all doing? Sending you all big love, you know? Love.
I don't get
it. Rejected the comment love. Big love.
They shut down one of my posts on my new profile, and they wouldn't let me make a page, and it's like,
how ridiculous is that?
Why are they restricting us? Because we're making a big influence, guys. I think so.
Yeah, Instagram blocked a comment of mine which mentioned Emmanuel, and another one that mentioned Gnosticism as well. It was about somebody just spewing absolute nonsense. So I just wanted to mention about Gnosticism and Emmanuel. And then it blocked my comment. It said comments like these have been removed due to hate speech. So what's going on there?
Getting the same thing. Basically, we were talking about like mystical things, and they do not want anything mystical out there.
Due to what?
Exoteric stuff only. Any of the esoteric stuff is restricted because it kind of goes again. I guess maybe AI's got a problem with the fact that it kind of opposes the exoteric in its weak-mindedness because it doesn't have a mind. It's just programmed to program itself through apparent contradictions. Apparently, they haven't programmed the paradox into the AI, which needs to happen if they're going to be spending that much power and water to make it go. Let's go, people. Let's make it work here a little better. Come on, guys. We're doing good, though. We're helping bring people to the true paradoxical truth of the shades of gray that is very relevant to the truth and understanding.
I think paradox is an interesting point here as well. Like Zeus's paradox and the paradox of Chiron being wounded, being the healer, being immortal, but not being able to live with his immortality because of the pain, having to give up his immortality so that he could pass away, so that he could be immortalized. There's a lot of paradox in the whole story of Chiron, really, if you think about it. What's the name of the guy that's buying up all the data centers? Do you guys know? What's his name? The billionaire.
Peter Thiel?
No. That's buying data centers and making a bid for TikTok, is it? Am I right? Is he made a bid for TikTok?
Netanyahu said that TikTok's one of their greatest tools, and you can't even say Zionist, even though somebody will say I'm a Zionist. That's fine for them to say, but if you say you're a Zionist, you can't say that. You get people have been banned for calling people Zionists who claim to be Zionists. So you can say you're something, but you can't call someone the thing that they call themselves. Like, madness.
That is madness.
But yeah, Netanyahu said that TikTok is one of the greatest tools for basically getting into the minds of young people, something like that anyway. And then you have the TikTok of Kronos, of time, trying to keep us in a loop, trying to confine the mind.
You know, Asherah, who's associated with Yahweh as his like previous wife before he became a misogynist and then started to only breed with humans, which is what fallen angels do. Asherah is considered to be the one that sits on the throne of Zion. She's considered to be the queen of heaven. Now, she's associated with Baal. And then, you know, Baal could be like a previous name of Yahweh in a different time to the different people. But then he kind of changed his representation from Baal to Yahweh and then demonized Baal, his previous self, and took away his wife out of the picture. It's a very mysterious and curious situation going on there. But if you read, I read through Kings while I was in the behind the bars, and in Kings, they talk about the entire situation where we have all of these different old gods and goddesses were being like demolished and destroyed and powderized, and they took all the priests and they murdered them all. And it's just like so savage. It's like, oh, this is a good god that goes and murders all of the priests. Why not convert them? Like, they're men of wisdom. So it's just horribly cold-blooded savagery and just terrible, like, violent rage going on. And then people continue to say, like, oh, the Heavenly Father's like the God of goodness, and like we don't have to hurt anybody because he'll do it for us. And I'm like, oh, so like that's what we want? We want to like sit here and like let karma or just the Heavenly Father do all the punishing of the bad people for us? And to me,
well,
that's not the answer. We want to help the bad people repent and become good and transmute their darkness into light. And that's the answer, not to wipe them out. But
well, what's happened is that it's both internal and external, and we can use the hexagram of Saturn as a very good example, as it being called Satan now, because that's just symbolic of water and magic. And plasma, the place of the Ma, where all things come from, all ideas come from, the unseen, the 99% that we are, that the 1% tell us doesn't exist. Just focus on the 1%. And what's happened is that I think the Romans did this, and it's probably before then and then up until today as well, is that what they do is they hijack people's gods. They hijack them and then use those guardians of dimensions. They use those forces and they weaponize them against us, like they've disconnected us from our ancestors, the guardians of dimensions from within. They've managed to block these waterways, and at the same time, they've managed to block us from the waters above as well, and our connection to Saturn by demonizing it. It's the same with dragons, demonized. All of this raw potential, all of this, connection to who we are. They've basically hijacked it and then fed us. They've hijacked our story and they fed us back an inverted, either watered down or warped story of who we are, where we are, what we're doing, and where we've come from, where we're going.
Yeah, man. That's so on point. You know, this watering down is quite interesting because we're being like led to the watering hole where we get watered down. You know, where the truth gets watered down, and they cascade their fountain of propaganda over us and wash away the truth, in a sense, which is a bizarre concept. So here, there's a big push by the Adani Group, which is investing $100 billion to develop AI-ready data centers and related infrastructure to make India the global data hub. That's something to keep your eyes on. Then there's Larry Fink, who is obviously, I think, is he the CEO of BlackRock? A consortium, including, obviously, we've got Mr. Gates part of this, because NVIDIA and Microsoft is part of this aligned data center acquisition, $40 billion into gaining control of the current and existing data hub centers. Then we've got Masayoshi Son. Obviously, that sounds Japanese, doesn't it? This is the SoftBank, and it's investing heavily into AI infrastructure, including $100 billion commitment to AI-related projects in the US, and in discussion to buy data center investor Digital Bridge. Digital Bridge. Wow. There we go. There's an allegation towards the idea of Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is the bow. And the bow represents moving an arrow. It's also a horse, man. A horse represents being able to move, being able to travel. So when you put the two symbols of a man that is able to choose to travel with his feet wherever he wants, because he's got the horse's feet, he can run like a horse, he's got total mobility, and he's got the arrow that he can actually at a distance affect things at a distance. This is representing, in a sense, this digital bridge, right? The digital bridge between being able to go there and being able to affect things at a distance, which is exactly what these data centers are really all about. So this is quite a big deal. And going back to Larry Fink, right? This is the BlackRock guy. And we know why BlackRock wants to have control of all of these centers, right? Larry Fink is also, and it gets more interesting, is also involved in high-level discussions regarding the future of TikTok in the USA. So they're under a lot of pressure to divest from its Chinese parental company, ByteDance, which is interesting. And this 2025 negotiation has indicated that Larry Fink, through his position at BlackRock, and this is connected to the Trump administration, just to be clear. So this Larry Fink has got direct lines to Trump because national security, BlackRock, go figure. Trump's also putting political pressure so that this group, that's basically this Finch guy and BlackRock, can have control to restructure TikTok to allow for US investor control. So what we're talking about is they want to get hold of all of our private information, and they want to put it through their data centers, and they want to control everything. And also, it's important to recognize that, just going back to this, to draw the associations here, right? Alongside NVIDIA and Microsoft. Now, NVIDIA and Microsoft are a big and important part of the potential to create high-resolution AI video content, right? So if you look between the dots, what does this mean? It means that these evil BlackRock people, BlackRock being an allusion towards Rupus Nigra, that's like that Mount Meru, if you will, but obviously a big proponent of military infrastructure in the US and R&D, want to get control over the data centers, and they want to get control over TikTok because TikTok's one of the biggest things. They've already got control over Facebook because we know that Facebook was funded by the CIA's front companies. This is like well documented. We've seen the evidence time and time again. And even though your AI computer will tell you it's not the case, it is very much the case. There are money trails. There's actual evidence for it. Where the money came from to actually launch Facebook decades ago. But so this Finch with his group is trying to get control of the data centers and get control over the infrastructure of TikTok. And then they will control Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And we already know that Elon Musk is in control of X. And Musk, even though Musk and Trump have publicly been at each other, we know these two are basically get a room, guys. Come on, get a room. It's obvious they need to get a room. And, you know, they will basically be controlling all of the data centers. India will have a huge role to play in this as well. So that's quite interesting. I'm wondering how that's going to work. I don't hear Russia's name being mentioned. I find that interesting in itself, right? This war for the data centers, that Russia doesn't seem to be playing an important role. But I suppose Russia and China and India are in bed with each other. So that coalition will probably work, and China and India together will have a significant role. So they will be able to come to the table with the Western Bloc and control this information. So this is what's going on in the world right now. And the world is currently wounded. The world has never before needed a wounded healer the way the world needs a wounded healer today. The world needs to, those wounds need to become a direct passage towards enlightenment to take us across the bridge into a higher plane of thinking that can inspire us towards action. I don't know, what do you guys think of all of this?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, when they talk about the healer, wounded healer, you know, it starts with your own healing your own wounds first, and then you can teach other people to heal their wounds. But as far as them doing anything having to do with healing, I think that's a little bit of a misrepresentation. They're really trying to discourage us from finding esoteric wisdom, and they're trying to keep us enslaved. And I think this has a lot to do with what's going on right now with the disclosure, because what's going on is there is a faction of ancestral watchers that have been watching over us to wait for us to start crossing that bridge. And now that we're crossing the bridge, they're trying to put up roadblocks on that bridge, and they're trying to misrepresent themselves as the one who are making the bridge, whereas they're trying to stop us from crossing it. So that's classic obfuscation, where they're representing black as white and white as black. And they're trying to get people confused and flip things on their head and have us see things upside down. So if we can pretend that their narrative's right, and that these invaders are going to come get us, and that we need to protect ourselves from the bad guys that are going to come from under there or up there, then they have us ensnared in their trap. But if we start to realize that what's going on is our liberators are starting to come up or down from above to be able to liberate us and help us cross this bridge, because we've began to cross it and they've been waiting for this time. Now, this thing sounds like really new age and kind of like wild science fiction thing, but it's really not, because it really ties back to Kabbalah and the Kabbalic mystics. The Kabbalistic mystics were warning the Babylonians when they saw Babylon fall. When they saw what happened was, you don't hear about this, but Sumer was a brilliant place where everything was like happening in harmony and balance. But there was a place in between Sumer and Babylon where things went terribly wrong. And it was an ancestral trauma that's chosen to be forgotten. The city of Ur, from which Abraham came. Ur was inundated by invaders and destroyed. Everyone was raped and it was pillaged, and they took everything and destroyed it and burned it all down. So when they created Babylon, they needed to seed language confusion to protect themselves from the invaders inundating their city. And so the intentions were good at first. And so they were trying to just keep things safe for their own people. But they got arrogant with the fact that they were able to have power by confusing people and seeding them with the fallen kings, 72 fallen kings for 72 fallen tribes. Then they started to build a tower to the heavens. They wanted to be able to use that tower to be able to talk to God. And so it kind of ties in with like transhumanism. They wanted to transcend their limitations back then. They wanted to become God then. And the Kabbalistic mystics came and warned them. They said, this is not a good path. We can see where this future is leading to. The prophets were talking to them. They were saying, turn back now. Your egoism is going to destroy you. Your entire kingdom is going to collapse and fall. Zion will be built from your ashes. We shall let you, if you're not going to heed our warning now, we shall let you fall, and you will have prophecy that it will take thousands of years for you to collapse. But at that point, you will be replaced and you'll be overcome by Zion. And so they didn't take the warning. They said, you don't know what you're talking about. This is going to be fine. We're going to be in connection with God directly. We'll take control. We'll have the divine power. And their arrogance got the best of them. And look where it's led them to. Really. They've used the mechanized industrial war machine, consumerism, fear-mongering, conditioning people to live in the shadows of doubt and discouragement, seeded them with food and medicine weapon systems to keep us weak and disempowered and divided. And so now that people are starting to wake up from that, it is creating somewhat of a division where some people are saying, oh no, this old way of comfort, and even though it's part of fear conditioning, it's really the best way because it's more familiar to us. It's our comfort zone. And so anybody that's known and found out the hard way that this comfort zone is leading to our detriment, they're ready to make that change. But even people that are in the collective, that are following the exoteric ways that are pushed on us, that are the things they want us to see, that's the opposite of esoteric, the things that are shown to us that are right in our face, like the carrot dangling on a string that we can never eat. They basically are telling us that, like, stay in your comfort zone, stick with what is familiar. Anybody who is talking anything about unfamiliar things, like the esoteric things, which is ancient, so it's not just new. It's just that there's things of wisdom that has been hidden. So the people that are coming across with this wisdom are being discouraged and restricted. They're not being allowed to speak. They're not being allowed to communicate their messages in digital media. Things are being restricted and shut down and prevented from being shared. And so it's very obvious to us. But the thing is that through oral tradition that continues now, through word of mouth and conversations in person, when people hear the truth is the light. And people understand the truth intuitively in their heart and their soul. And so people are understanding that this is a way for the future that is sustainable. And the ways of the past, the ways of Babylon, were never sustainable. And we're seeing that unsustainability now because things are starting to collapse. We have so many things that have fallen apart in our economy, in our ability to create from resources, synthetic technologies, and using compromised ways to be able to stretch out the preservation of our goods with mercury in the vaccines, with genetically modified organisms to make things have a longer shelf life. Also with using ammonia in the beef as we bring it up from the rainforest in the Amazon while they cut down the trees simultaneously, then poison us with ammonia in the fast food hamburgers. But basically what's going on there is that we have, like, some people stand out against the corrupt ones. Like particular Wendy's is an old-fashioned fast food place. And so they have regular American beef that's not brought from the rainforest, does not have ammonia in it. And I think somebody mentioned to me that their French fries don't use the pesticides like the ones at McDonald's that are made from a horrible, toxic, fatal pesticide that needs to be outgassed for months or if not years before it can even be used for human consumption. I can't think of the name, but it starts with mono something. But that kind of stuff is being shoved down our throats, and people have gotten to be comfortable with it. And if you look at National Lampoon's Vacation with the Chevy Chase character, his job is to make these food preservatives, and he goes around in the comedy movies showing, oh, look how long we can make this last. Like, this is awesome. We can make the food last forever on the shelves and da 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 da. We can make so much money. I'm gonna get a raise and I'm gonna get my bonus and all this stuff. And it's all about this money from poisoning all the foods. And so it's just so ridiculous if you start to think about all the detriments that these poisons have done. And but the thing about it is that they've used these frankenfoods, artificial flavors and colors, to really work on the human taste buds and make these toxic foods taste better than real foods. And they discouraged us from eating raw vegetables. They want us to eat all of these these saturated oils, some hydrogenated oils, which there's no safe level of hydrogenated oil to ever eat. That's not safe for human consumption. But they put that in like peanut butter and stuff where people thought they were having a healthy version of food. Whereas they've even corrupted those as well. And they've actually pushed phytoestrogenic foods into the crunchy, healthy demographic where people are like, oh, I don't eat like junk foods. I eat like healthy foods like flax seeds and turmeric, which are very phytoestrogenic. We do not need estrogen for men or younger women at all. Estrogen is helpful for only for older women. But if you look up, what about phytoestrogens in plastic packaging, in turmeric, in flax, in soy, in milk, in alcohol? What do they do to a pregnant woman? And if you look that up online, it'll tell you flat out, it's going to make your children sexually retarded. Their hormone systems are going to be mutated. And so if you don't think mutated hormone systems is a problem, look how the kids are acting now. These kids are very confused. And we're not allowed to question that because it's politically correct that they're allowed to have their orientations be swayed in strange ways. Some people have come up with an understanding that maybe this is because there's overpopulation and this is a way to curb the overpopulation. This is a good thing. And maybe potentially that is true. I don't really know, but I feel bad for the kids. I really do. And I feel like if they wanted to have a functional life and have a proper family and be able to have a unity together to create that family in a natural way, that's being lost to them. It's very sad. And so they could always like adopt or have like artificial insemination done, but it's just another thing they have to pay doctors to be able to do, not be able to do it naturally themselves. And when we can do things with nature, like Hippocrates, who created medicine for us, who said that food is our medicine. And then pharmakia came around, the use of sorcery to use snake oil to poison people in the name of fake medicine, but tricking people into poisoning themselves with the falseness of what's supposed to be the cure. TBHQ and various preservatives are absolutely detrimental to the liver and to the kidneys. They do terrible things to us. And so they say, oh, it's okay in small amounts. But really, is it though? I mean, you got fluoride, like fluoride is great for your teeth, but they don't mention what it does to the pineal gland. But in order to decalcify the pineal gland from exposure to fluoride and aluminum combination, you can just alkalize your diet. Basically, all you need to do to heal yourself from all this stuff is start to eat more raw vegetables, green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, and fish. Fish, although it can be laden with mercury, and you can get better fish like trout from the rivers, or salmon, which lives most of its life in the rivers, is much more less mercury in there. It's much lower in mercury. So if you also are willing to eat fish, which a lot of people have been discouraged from because not everybody lives near the coast, there's small fish like sardines, anchovies, sprats, and the like are very low in mercury because they're much smaller fish and they're healthier to eat. But there's a lot of vegetables that are like fish and have omega-3 rich anti-inflammatory oils like avocados and olives and grapeseed oil and other oils like that are
seeds
anti-inflammatory. But they also mention coconut oil as an anti-inflammatory oil with omega-3 a lot of times, but they're mistaken. Coconut oil does not have any omega-3s in it, but it does have omega-9s, like walnuts have omega-3 and 9. And so when you can get oils that have a more diverse range besides just omega-6, the inflammatory type of oils, that's a good thing. So you want to get your 9s, your omega-9s and your omega-3s into your diet so you can lower your inflammation and bloating that the omega-6s cause, which causes issues with joints and stomach issues as well with all the guts. So what do we got here with the TBHQ? What does it do to us?
Well, the TBHQ is a known carcinogen. They've tried to hide this away. I've noticed the AI has been retrained in how to speak about it, but I've been researching this for decades. Just for those of you that don't know, it's often written up in American foods as being an antioxidant. Believe it or not, they will write antioxidant on the bloody label. Whenever I've traveled the world and I've found American things and I've had to research it, antioxidant is often that E390, E319 preservative. Now, this tertiary butyl hydroquinone, TBHQ. It's got cytotoxic and genotoxic effects, including increased tumor risk in animals. Finding remains contradictory, with other studies showing no increased neoplasm. Now, we know that those findings can be rigged. There's a lot of money in this industry. The original findings by the independent organizations were very clear. It's a known carcinogen. But obviously, since then, the companies that put TBHQ, and I want to explain to you how wildly it is. If you eat crisps, you're eating TBHQ. If you're eating a chocolate bar, you're probably eating TBHQ, right? If you're eating sweets like Smarties or this or any sweets, you're eating TBHQ. If you drink fruit juice, there's a good chance that you're drinking TBHQ. If you get any processed or ready-made meals, you're probably eating TBHQ, right? TBHQ is in the sauces. If you use ketchup, or if you use chili sauce, or if you use, whatever sauces you like, mayonnaise, you got TBHQ, right? Fruit juice, we've mentioned fruit juice. Do you eat peanuts? Most of the world's peanuts is treated in TBHQ. They coat the peanuts in TBHQ. So you want to soak your nuts. Guys, you want to soak your nuts in nice, cold, fresh water. It's good for them. No, but on a serious note, it's good to soak your nuts in cold, fresh water, by the way.
Absolutely. Pistachios are
easily
digestible, and you don't need to with pistachios, but all the other nuts you should soak them in water first, and that'll make them much more palatable and digestible for the gut.
Oh, you mean edible nuts, right? Those two. Yes, it's also good to soak those nuts in cold, fresh water. But like all nuts want to be in cold, fresh water. But this TBHQ is like, it's in everything, man. They used to use other preservatives, but TBHQ has become the standard Q. Now, according to the research that these guys say, that it's dose dependent, right? Carcinogenic effects. But when you're getting TBHQ in a packet of crisps, in a chocolate bar, in a sweet, in a donut, in a cool drink, you're probably getting it in the cool drinks. You're getting it in your peanuts. They're coating your nuts with it. They're probably putting it in like breads for all we know. I don't know. I haven't looked into that, but I wouldn't be surprised. They're putting it into just about everything you can imagine. All the sauces, all the condiments that you eat with your food. If you get like a ready-made pasta sauce to throw onto your things to make a pasta, you're eating TBHQ. So if you imagine how easy it is to just top up your dose, right? It's not something that you're just going to elect to eat that and control the dose and not get carcinogens in your body. It's even by these other studies, they do studies with very low doses. But the reality is, if you eat junk food, you're getting loads of TBHQ, and it is carcinogenic, and you are increasing the risks of cancer phenomenally if you get high risks. So that's just one example of how evil these buggers are. We got the last. It's been 3 hours and 7 minutes. If you guys want to say your last bits.
I've been sitting on some bits for a while. I don't suppose you've got the tab with the that you had up with the data centers, and it was the Larry Fink and that Japanese name. Do you still have that tab up at all, perchance? I just want to go through the names quickly.
Give me a minute while I find it.
Yeah, well, the reason why I bring this up is because you say that lots of these data centers are in India. Well, India landed on the dark side of the moon not so long ago, and they didn't land on the moon. The moon just represents our emotion, our collective emotion, and the subconscious. So this is what they're up to with these data centers, which I believe is related to the Dayat centaurs. They're creating a wound so that they can be the saviors to heal us, because we outsource our power. So with these names here, There's the bite dance that I saw. Let's start with Larry Fink. Okay, Larry Fink. Larry Fink. Okay, he's trying to change the way that we think. The is going inwards. Going to is the going inwards. The inwards is the subconscious. These people are trying to change how we access and use our emotional body, our emotions. This is what they feed off. This is what the AI, the artificial virus, feeds off because it doesn't have its own emotion. These people are void of emotion. This is why there's so much water used in data centers. Okay, let's look at these names. So Elon Musk mentioned before he's alien Mars. There was...
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Google has removed Larry Fink's name. You guys saw it. I showed it to you a little while ago.
Is that
this
the top,
is the same list. His name's off the list, dude.
Is that at the top?
Is it?
Right at the top.
No.
Keep going. I did see it right at the top.
No, that was this one. That was to do with this. And that was to do with the investments to buy TikTok or to get to control TikTok. But this is the list of billionaires buying data centers. And before, when I showed you guys the list, Larry Fink's name was number 3 or 4. They've replaced his name with Elon Musk without telling you how much money Elon Musk is investing. I find that incredible. Just thought I'd share that with you. But his name should be on the list for $40 billion. You guys can go and check 15 minutes ago in the history of this video. His name was there. And since we're talking, the AI removed it.
That's nuts. I was trying to prove to Zeralath that in no way did Thoth ever side with Seth. And I got most of the information the second time. But the first time there was a word where it said that Thoth was never surreptitious or like drawn towards the dark side. And they took that part completely out in the second lookup that I did. So this is very strange. It almost seems like once we uncover some dirt that they then are able to cover up that dirt somehow. I don't know how they're able to do it, but we see it happening right before our eyes multiple times in a row. And it's
well, I just want to finish this like list of stuff which I've been sitting on. I just need to get off my chest. That is if you keep scrolling down, there's a name, that Japanese name, which is like Messiah Sun. You said it sounded Japanese. I can't remember how it's spelt. Under the Reuben brothers. Oh, that name's gone as well. It sounded... all right. Okay. Right. It sounded like...
dealing with an AI, brother.
Yeah. So it sounded like Messiah Sun. So you have the bite dance, which was one of the data farms or whatever, the bite dance, which sounds like Biden's. And Biden is the two-pronged staff of Hades, which represents the underworld. You have India landing on the dark side of the moon, the underworld, the subconscious. You have one of the guys' names called Messiah Sun, and you have Larry Fink using Black Rock, which is magnetic north, which is strongly linked to the North Pole of Saturn. And this all signals to me that they're harvesting our emotions. Our emotions is our data, and they're extracting it from us. And at the same time as they're extracting it from us, they're blocking the ways in which we connect to this raw data, which is by using the waters, by using this flow to connect to these gods, to our ancestors. And they've managed to block it from trauma. They're kind of creating a wound, by stopping us accessing these parts of ourselves they create a wedge there between us and source, like Akhenaten did with the sun. That's what these technocrats are doing. They're creating a wedge between us and source, and they're just drip feeding us all this nonsense. So I just wanted to show people how our emotions are used, because with data centers they use a lot of water, and we're told it's to cool down the data centers, but I really think that they're using this water to tap into the memory of the earth, so that therefore they can in turn reflect this water back to us as like a distorted mirror, and give us a false narrative of our history, and perhaps even feed this water back into our waterways via the mind and via drinking, um, to further detach us from source.
Spot on. And I got a little something too, just to close it all out. I know that in the Bible they've mentioned that Satan is a terrible devil, and that the light bringer is bad and associated with the snake in the Garden of Eden. But really, if you look at it, we have Jesus identifies himself as the bright morning star in Revelations 22:16. And King David associates the idea that he has the inner adversary, which is the true meaning of Ha-Satan, the Judaic principle or aspect. And so his inner adversary is driving him to number Israel, take a sinful consensus, which leads to a plague. Which then he ends up buying the threshing floor for Solomon's temple, where Solomon falls into deep transgression and takes over 700 different wives that are not Israeli. They get him to worship very many different gods and goddesses. And so with all of these different he's not worshiping the Lord of King David that he followed. He's worshiping like nearly a dozen other gods and goddesses, and because of his 700 different wives of different origins, as a result of David's temptation of his inner adversary towards greed and towards violence, when he knows that he's making rash decisions when he goes to slay Goliath and enter into war. It's his arrogance that he gives up on his own people because of their cowardice, and so in that way he's kind of glorifying himself as like being better than all of these soldiers who have been trained their entire lifetimes to be the best warriors, whereas he's really a shepherd, but he has honed in the skills to be able to use the bow and rope, where he throws the stones with the rope. He practiced that on being able to hit bears and tigers and lions like flat in the middle of the eye. Maybe not tigers, but bears and lions at least. And so he was able to hit them in their eyes and send them packing when they would come for his sheep. Now, all these other people were used to having used a sword. And so they were so intimidated by Goliath, and they felt like they were powerless against him. They would be crushed to death. But David was confident that his skills that he had honed as a shepherd would be more than sufficient to be able to overcome even the biggest giant. And so because of his conceitedness that he would be able to stand in front of all of these other soldiers and be able to save his people, they consider that he had the inner adversary that was tempting him within. And it's not something external to him. Now, if you start to look this up online, it's going to continually tell you that this is a different external figure that's tempting him, that's trying to entice him to things. He's there watching over him. He's been sent down by God, and he's there as a person himself. But really, if you look at the original translation, there's no figure that's there. And if somebody like David, who is the most noble sage king of all the kings of Israel that ever existed, when the 12 tribes were united, and if they can say that David had the inner adversary of all the different people that could have Satan within them, You would think David would be the last person to mention that. And also Jesus saying himself to be the bright morning star. They'll try to convince you that what he's trying to say. And the mention of David is used in Chronicles 21:1 and leading up until 22:1, where they mention his inner adversary. But in Jesus is mentioned in Revelations 22:16. What they'll tell you is that they're using the Greek ho aster ho lampros ho prionos, being the bright morning star, which actually signifies that it's his role to be the bringer of dawn and salvation. But they fail to mention that the actual light bringer, Lucifer, is also the bringer of dawn and salvation, the bringer of wisdom and understanding. And so they're using double speech here to like try to discourage us from understanding what's really being articulated here. But basically, if you look at it, the Jewish people and the Islam people worship Lucifer. And what's his symbol? The crescent moon with the star inside the moon, which is the Islam flag. So if the other different Abrahamic religions are worshiping Lucifer, but the Goy or the Goyim or the Gentiles or the infidels are the only one that are being led to their own demise by believing in the lies of the misinterpretations, it's almost like they're just laughing at us. And the elites try to call us the willfully ignorant or the walking dead because we just buy their lies hook, line, and sinker every time. And it's like right clear in our face. And if you try to like look it up online, they'll keep throwing you these curveballs. And they keep changing the data too. When you find the truth, it's hard to get back to it. So what I've been doing is I take a picture when I'm there and I'm seeing the real information. I take a picture, then I search it again and I get a different image. I get a different picture. I get a different stream of words that are taking out the key arguments that I've been able to find. And it's just been more and more difficult to stay with a narrative of trying to trace us back to ancient mysticism. And it's being hidden. Oh, look at your bird. That's a pretty bird you got there. Is it a parakeet?
A Garthon. Oh, sorry, my mic was on. I didn't realize. A Garthon. He's a cockatiel. He's still young.
Fabulous. Those are very smart birds.
Yeah, they live 20, 25 years long. Yeah. Longer than a dog or a cat. Well, they can. Yeah, you know what you guys are saying are so on point. We should probably be wrapping it up. I'm just so blown away at what I'm discovering here, you know. So when you so this list. So when I try to go back and find my history, and I want you all to pay attention, the tab was removed from my history by Chrome. Okay. So Google AI removed that particular tab from my history. I've noticed this happen from time to time. You guys all saw me open the tab, right? I didn't go and delete any tabs from my history, but that one was gone. Then I go list of billionaires buying data centers, right? And how much each one and associated groups invested. Now I'm trying to specify like the amount of money, because the first one they told me the amounts. So Elon Musk, 20 billion. It's not a small amount of money. Okay, it's significant. That's 200,000 GPUs. Wow. GPUs. I want us to be clear. GPUs. That's graphic processors. This is for AI video, right? That's what GPUs are used for. Just to pay attention. And that takes us back to the other guy's investment, which was with NVIDIA. Microsoft's involved, which is the GPU producers. Action. Adani has marked 100 billion. Okay, that's for the India that we heard about. Mukesh Ambani, that's Reliance Industries. That's Gujarat, India. That's 120 megawatt coming online system. Jeff Bezos, a humble 12 billion for data centers in Louisiana. Stephen Schwarzman. Now, this Blackstone, This is they manage portfolios. It's an investment company, and they own 55 billion of the current investment profiles for these data centers, and they have a 70 billion plus pipeline for future developments. But this is off in future land. We don't know when or what, so it's not current. Interesting that they put this here. It's like bullshit to baffle brains. Mark Zuckerberg, a whopping 60 billion. Okay, that's a very proper, serious. His name wasn't on our last list. Don't you find that interesting? With 30 billion structured as a private deal involving Blue Owl Capital. That's interesting. Rubin Brothers, it seems like they're throwing bullshit at our brains with percentages and stake in Global Switch and this and that and 5 million square foot. And there's a lot of words, and they're not telling us money. 200 million. I don't know how this guy got his name on the list. 200 million. We're talking like 60 billion. What are we talking about 200 million for? Bullshit baffles brains. Nagi Soros, some more established partnership, more bullshit baffles brain. Woo! $14 million. I mean, come on, man. We're talking tens of billions. Don't waste our time with that. It's like when you go to the shop and they want to make a big deal out of the 10 cents small change, and that, but they've like they haven't given you your 20 rand, your $20 note or something. You know, like, you're not worried about the 5 cents. Like, give me the $20 note, mate. Terry Gu, 1.4 billion, 5 billion. Okay. Now, other key data centers. Now they're telling us about the MX, the BlackRock. Okay. Here's the 40 billion. They've hidden his name. They've removed his name from the list, and they've put him down there as an insignificant little other key investments. But 40 billion, that's like the third biggest investment on the list. It should be right near the top, right? And then here they put down other ones, which is like a few billion, 6 billion, 3 billion. 11 billion is a fairly significant one for Switch, to Switch including private. Oh, now they're playing with words. What is that 11 billion for? What's this including private? We don't know. So there's an idea. Now I had to actually Google and put Larry Fink buying up data centers now to get the facts back, right? Because they removed it. Now that I've asked them, they have to give me this. Deal size 40 billion. Aligned data centers, that's the one they showed us that was insignificant in the smaller group. Future expansion up to 100 billion. Okay, that's the deal is happening right now as we speak, by the way. So the deal should be closing any time in the next 2 or 3 months. The deal has been happening since like the late last year. Why? This gets interesting, right? This gets really, really, really interesting. So according to him, to deliver the infrastructure necessary to power the future of AI, right? And it's because he fears an AI bubble, right? And this is interesting. And I want us to focus on the energy intensive data centers that house them, right? So this strategy recognizes that the true bottleneck for AI development is not just chips, but the physical energy intensive data centers that house them. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about electricity, we're talking about energy, we're talking about resources. BlackRock, by the way, has also thrown $500 million at the UK data centers. Food for thought. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on with the data center story. Namaste, Vince. How are you doing, dear? Hope you're good, man. Hope you're well. And yeah, that's me. I was just completely flabbergasted in how fast AI jumped in there to edit our information, and she didn't realize that we had it on a live. So you guys can go and check the live. You can see the Google. You can see with your own eyes. You can see the next Google, and AI has edited the story because we're not supposed to be discussing Finch, right? Fink. So people research Fink. AI doesn't want you talking about him. He doesn't want us thinking about him. What is BlackRock up to? That's my last words on the matter. Big love to everybody. If you guys have any commentary on that, last commentary before we say goodbye.
You're muted, Indy.
Thank you, sir. I got a quick list here of all of the different gods that are worshipped in the pantheon of the Elohim after they chose Yahweh to make it a henotheistic regime. They first worshipped, and this was after Solomon kind of went to the dark side, and then they were conquered by the Babylonians, and they took on worship of their other gods. So they worshipped Ashtoreth by the Sidonians, Shamash by the Moabites, Molech by the Ammonites. We have Baal, Asherah, and Jezebel were root Judaic gods and goddesses that were rebelled against. And then the Succoth Beneth were from Babylon. Nergal, which is supposed to have one R, were worshipped by the Kata. Ashima was worshipped by the Hamath. Nibhaz and Tartak were worshipped by the Avites. And
can you flash this on the screen, by the way, or can't you?
I have it written down. I have it in the comment.
Okay. No worries. It's all good.
But I did this from reading the Bible and writing it in pencil when I was behind bars for a couple of days. And then they have Nibhaz and Tartek by the Avites, and Adramelech and Anamelech by the Sepharites, who were the ones that they were burning their children towards, in addition to Baal and Melech and Molech. So there's all these various gods that were associated with the ancient rites, and then they chose to use Yahweh. But we found that around 600 BC, Isaiah translated all of these different names that they reference in different situations all into one name, Yahweh. So these names used to be used when they were articulating the various different stories, but then they kind of reduced it down to show that they pretended to only worship the one. But we know better than that, because all of these are mentioned in the new international version of the Holy Bible. And if you can get your hands on the new international version, they spill the beans. But if you look at the King James version, they don't even mention Asherah or Baal in there. So, I mean, they mention Asherah and Baal like hundreds of times in the New International Version. I've written down 14 pages of their references. So it's not like they just mention them once or twice. They've really significantly mentioned these other gods and goddesses here. And they associate Asherah with the Asherah poles, which are made from the Christmas tree, which is then turned into the May tree, the maypole. And the maypole is still used by some pagans today. And the Christmas tree is also said to be part of the worship of Asherah. Then they have Christians celebrating Easter, which is the name of Ishtar, and use Christmas trees, which is Asherah worship. So they have the Christians worshiping the goddesses without us even knowing. So how many Christians out there have used a Christmas tree or heard of a maypole and don't even know that Easter is a representation of Inanna, who the Akkadian name is Ishtar? And Inanna was said to have gone to the underworld to have a squabble with her sister, her older sister Ereshkigal, who ended up killing her. But then she had her handmaiden come and save her. So this all ties back to Mesopotamia, and they're trying to cut off the connection from Abraham coming from Ur and carrying with him all of the worship of these Babylonian, Akkadian, and Sumerian gods and goddesses. And the fact that there's goddesses in the pantheon excites me the most, because it ties us back to the matriarchal period that they're trying to cover up from us, where men and women shared the power, which is something that we're coming back into now. And there's female prime ministers around the globe of major countries like India and Brazil, and also Iceland, where they're making huge strides to make gender equality there in those countries. And they don't really mention any of that in our news here in America. I don't know about for you guys in the South America and in England, but there's been giant moves towards gender equality and women coming into authority, where what's going on right now is men are privileged and take exclusive authority in our society by discriminating against agreeableness, which is a typical feminine trait of the females that they get discriminated for using, which is basically being compassionate and understanding. And so only people are allowed to use upward mobility that are cruel and harsh, and that's what allows people to become rich. So the people that end up with a high fortune are heartless. And so it's like you choose to become either poor and happy, or if you want to become rich, you need to be cruel and heartless. And there's no way to live. There's no way to have our authorities end up being. But if we're able to share our power, the people that are in abundance will not be poor, and they will not be cruel. And so there's going to be people with wisdom. And just like our elders now have been seeded with all these degenerative brain diseases and heart diseases from our food weapon system and medicine weapon system, we're now finding naturopathic cures to degenerative brain diseases and heart conditions, which are mango extract and cellular sugar or anti-sugar. And these two remedies can heal our elders and allow them to provide us with their wisdom and insight once again for the first time in this age, where we have been seeded with poison for so long that we've used to having our elders not being able to communicate to us or think clearly. But now comes a time when they will be able to. And these remedies, mango extract, mangoferin, and D-ribose, the anti-sugar, can be used to reverse the conditions that are falling upon our elders to make them not be able to find and communicate their wisdom. This time has come for them to find it again and bring it to us.
Amen, brother. Big love. Last words, Shinobi?
Yeah, I've been kind of deciding whether or not to say anything because I don't want to keep us even longer. Because if I mention stuff, we might be talking for like another half an hour, and I mean I don't want to keep people, but at the same time, like yeah, why not? I'll just say it, and then that will be it. I just want to say as well that I'm gonna get StreamYard account later today, so possibly today, later today, maybe tomorrow. I might be going live and sharing some of my book, but just some like sort of mission statements from it, which relate to this artificial and our current timeline, and hopefully sort of like alter people's perception about the current timeline trajectory and where we're going. And I'm gonna try and get some visuals for that as well while I'm reading out some of this story. And then at the same time, as having a StreamYard account will enable me to carry on sharing more information, because I've got a lot of things I want to get out there. I haven't been really very active on my channel. Almost got 100 followers though, so happy about that. I'll just share quickly before we go that the with all of the religions, you like Judaism, Islam, Christianity, if you look at the symbols, the hexagrams, as above, so below, and that kind of represents a cross or the boundaries. The cross of Christianity could represent, crossing the threshold. Christ being the Son of God and also the living waters at the same time too. And then the moon and Venus of Islam, the moon representing the emotional subconscious, and then Venus being associated with Ishtar and the journey to the underworld or the subconscious. So all of these symbols that are being used are quite powerful symbols, and they represent the crossing of thresholds, and people don't really cross those thresholds. People are happy to sort of just trundle along on the 5% conscious mind and not want to go inwards, which would have been the original teachings of these religions before they were corrupted, before they were religions, when they were just more teachings, just pathways to navigate this realm before they were corrupted. So my point is that all of these symbols bring up for me plasma, which is the 99% whatever, and earlier it was brought up the world being overpopulated. The only overpopulation is the ego of the 1% filling us up with their BS. That 1% has been inflated to make us think that it's overpopulated, but really they want this is the kind of inversion of the matter, because they use the matter, they're trying to dissect the matter, and always explain what the unexplainable is by giving this really short-sighted window perception of reality. But we are the 99%, we are the pure potential, we are the waveform, and that cannot be stopped. And the only way to overcome this virus or the parasite is not to kill it. As Tamura said earlier, they need to be killed. I agree. They need death. They need to die, but they need to change. They need to transmute, because like if a parasite is killed inside of you, it releases toxic like heavy metals. So what you need to do is you need to let the parasite go through you, release the parasite, dissolve it, and alchemize it. So this parasite in the world, so-called elite, they need to be cleansed and purged, and they need to not be killed, but they need to die. And I think that as within, so without, the internal systems are reflected in the outer systems, and there is a lot of alchemy going on in the world at the moment, this shadow being revealed, and I call it a rude awakening, because it's sort of people need to alchemize this, like what's in the files and stuff. People say, oh, this trauma they're pushing on us with all this information of what's in the files. It's like, how dare people think that way? How dare they try and say that this affects them? This isn't about them. This is about the children, and this is about the divine child of this realm that has been abused for so long. And this is the way that we can alchemize this and understand these systems of control which are outside of us, but at the same time they're internal as well. And what we need to really do is not focus our energy on killing or destroying or causing chaos, but catharsis, which is basically alchemy, transmuting. And that's what we need to do with ourselves. And as we do that with ourselves, it will be so without as well. And we do see it happening on the outside realms. But I'll just leave it with that. The plasma, bringing the plasma to the 1%, the flip of the 1% to the 99%, and this overpopulation, overhype of the elites, that really the light is us. And yeah, I don't want to waffle on. See, that's why I wasn't going to say anything, because I was like, right, I want to try and just say my notes just quickly and not go off into anything. And I could be chatting here I could probably do like a monologue for like an hour, so I'll leave it at that. Much love to you guys.
On this next.
I can't hear you for some reason. Hang on. For some reason, I can't hear anything.
They cut you off, Franklin. It's been a great show. Om Shanti. Blessed be. Much love, guys. Thank you to all of everybody in the chats. We love you guys. It's been a great show. Franklin might be trying to come back in to do his exit, but not so certain. You know what he says. He says the same